My dad texted me that I was not invited to the luxury Mediterranean cruise I had fully funded for our family right after I bought them a house worth $848,000. So I sold the house while they were sailing across the ocean. You will not believe what happened when they returned. Before I continue this story, let me know your age and where you are watching from in the comments below. Welcome to the Revenge Order channel. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Bella, and I am 33 years old. I stood at the premium check-in counter at the Anchorage International Airport. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the snow-capped Chugach Mountains loomed under a pale gray winter sky. Inside, the terminal hummed with the steady drone of travelers dragging rolling suitcases and checking departure screens. I held my passport in my left hand. The dark blue cover felt heavy, a tangible symbol of the rest I so desperately needed. As the chief executive officer of an Arctic expedition outfitting firm, my daily life consisted of coordinating icebreaker schedules, bush plane supply drops, and extreme weather logistics. I worked relentless 80-hour weeks to keep my company highly profitable. To force a wedge into that crushing schedule, I spent $35,000 booking a 2-week Mediterranean cruise for my family. It was meant to be an olive branch. I wanted to close the widening distance between my demanding career and the high society circles my parents, William and Evelyn, preferred to orbit. I secured premium staterooms for them. I upgraded a luxury suite for my younger sister, Harper, and her fiancé, Jackson. Jackson was a man who owned a closet full of imported Italian suits, but had not collected a legitimate paycheck since his last tech venture collapsed 2 years ago. I swallowed my distaste for him, hoping the sun-drenched private excursions in Rome and the Amalfi Coast would finally bring us all together. I stepped forward as the line advanced. My phone vibrated inside my thick winter coat pocket. I pulled the device out, assuming it was a text from my mother, telling me they were waiting near the VIP lounge gates. Instead, the notification flashing across my locked screen was from my father. I swiped to open it. The message read, "You are not coming. Mom wants just family. We gave your ticket to Jackson's sister." I stopped walking. The passenger behind me bumped their luggage into my heel, offering a sharp sigh of annoyance. But I barely registered the physical impact. I stared at the glowing screen. The harsh fluorescent lights of the terminal seemed to dim. Just family. I funded every single cent of their European getaway. I curated the private tours so Harper could have a flawless pre-wedding vacation, and my parents could capture their pristine social media photos. In return, I was erased, replaced by a woman I had met exactly twice, simply because she fit their aesthetic better than a daughter who worked for a living. My fingertips dug into the hard plastic handle of my suitcase. I did not drop my head. I did not step up to the ticket counter and beg the Delta agent to issue a new boarding pass. I stepped out of the stanchioned lane. The chill from the automatic sliding doors washed over my face, snapping my focus into sharp relief. I unlocked my phone and dialed my mother's number. It rang 3 times. Evelyn answered. The distinct clinking of crystal champagne flutes and the low, refined hum of the first-class lounge echoed through the speaker. Harper was laughing nearby, a bright, careless sound. Evelyn did not offer a greeting. She simply sighed, a soft breath meant to convey profound inconvenience. "What is it, Bella?" she asked. "We are preparing to board." "Why did Dad just text me that my ticket was given away?" I asked. I kept my voice level, forcing the tremor out of my chest. Evelyn took a slow sip of her drink. I could hear the ice shifting against the glass. "You need to lower your expectations, Bella," she replied smoothly. "You are always so rigid. You are a workaholic buzzkill. Harper wants to relax before her wedding, and your endless talk about logistics and shipping routes just ruins the mood. Jackson's sister needed a break. You have plenty of money. You can fly to Europe whenever you want. We just need family time right now. I bought you a house." I said the words, tasting like copper in my mouth. I paid $848,000 in cash for that estate last month because the bank was moving to foreclose on your condo. I saved you from living on the street. Evelyn scoffed. The sound was light, airy, and dripping with toxic condescension. "We let you buy us that property because it was the bare minimum you owed us for raising you. Do not act like a martyr, Bella. You owe us this peace." Before I could reply, the phone shifted. Harper's voice filtered through the speaker, sharp and cruel. "Stop acting so jealous," Bella Harper sneered. "You cannot buy your way into my wedding trip just because you are a miserable spinster. Let us enjoy our vacation." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. The noise of the Anchorage terminal rushed back into my ears. A decade of trying to earn my family's love evaporated into the cold northern air. I realized, looking out at the snow-covered tarmac, that I was not a daughter to them. I was a limitless bank account. They felt entitled to my wealth while actively despising the woman who earned it. I turned my back on the ticketing counter. I found a secluded table at a nearby terminal cafe and ordered a black coffee. I sat down and unzipped my carry-on bag, retrieving my encrypted corporate laptop. The emotional cord tying me to their endless greed was severed. They wanted a family vacation without me. I was going to ensure they got exactly what they asked for, starting with the credit cards currently linked to every single stateroom on their luxury cruise. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the middle of the crowded Anchorage terminal with the phone pressed to my ear. I lowered the device and stared at the dark screen. Travelers brushed past my shoulders, rushing toward their designated gates, oblivious to the silent fracture of a family unit happening right next to the ticketing kiosks. My chest felt tight, a sharp constriction beneath my wool winter coat. Decades of ingrained conditioning told me to apologize, to text them, and ask how I could fix my behavior to earn back my spot on the itinerary. I actually opened a new text message. My thumb hovered over the digital keyboard. Then I deleted the draft. I hit redial instead. The phone rang twice before Evelyn picked up. Her sharp sigh echoed through the speaker, layered over the clinking of expensive silverware and the low hum of the first-class lounge. "Bella, I already told you we are preparing to walk down the jet bridge," my mother said, her tone dripping with practiced exasperation. "Do not make this a larger issue than it needs to be. You have a terrible habit of suffocating people with your demands." "I need you to clarify something for me," I said, keeping my voice steady, stripped of any trembling emotion. "I spent $35,000 on this specific itinerary. I booked the Vatican tours. I secured the Amalfi Coast wine tastings. You are giving my boarding pass to a woman I do not know, and you are telling me I am the one suffocating you." Evelyn laughed, a soft, breathy sound designed to make me feel small. "You are keeping score again. This is exactly why Harper did not want you on the ship. You treat every dollar you spend like a leash. You buy things and then expect us to bow down and worship your generosity. We are your parents. You should want to provide for us without attaching a heavy guilt trip to every single gift. Jackson told us his sister is fun, spontaneous, and does not constantly talk about shipping manifests and thermal gear. You bring a very dark, stressful energy into every room you enter." The sheer velocity of her psychological spin was breathtaking. She took my financial support and weaponized it, painting herself as the victim of my oppressive generosity. My mind flashed back to a cold Tuesday morning exactly 6 months ago. I had driven to my parents' old condominium to drop off groceries. I found William sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a foreclosure notice printed on harsh yellow paper. He had secretly drained their retirement accounts, sinking their remaining cash into a string of catastrophic investments to keep up appearances at his local country club. The bank was coming for their home. They were 30 days away from carrying their belongings onto the street in garbage bags. I did not scold them. I did not lecture my father on his reckless vanity. I contacted my corporate real estate attorney that same afternoon. I pulled $848,000 in liquid cash from my business accounts and purchased a sprawling, pristine estate in one of the most exclusive gated communities in the city. The property featured heated driveways, custom cedar pillars, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the freezing waters of the Cook Inlet. I handed them the keys and a residential lease agreement that allowed them to live there rent-free for the rest of their natural lives. I paid the property taxes. I paid the exorbitant homeowners association fees. When Evelyn walked through the custom glass front doors for the first time, she did not thank me. She ran her hand along the kitchen island and complained that the imported Italian marble was a slightly cooler shade of white than she preferred. "You think I use my money as a leash?" I asked, standing firm near the terminal windows. "I bought you a house, Mom, a luxury estate you live in for free because Dad gambled away your pension." "Do not speak about your father that way," Evelyn snapped, her voice turning sharp and defensive. "We allowed you to buy that property because it was the bare minimum you owed us. We sacrificed our best years raising you. We paid for your braces and your childhood piano lessons. The house is simply a return on our investment. You have a thriving company. You can afford it. Do not act like you moved mountains when you merely wrote a check." The sound of rustling fabric signaled the phone changing hands. Harper's voice pierced the speaker, shrill and entirely devoid of empathy. "Are you seriously still whining about the house?" Bella, my sister, sneered. "You bought that place for your own ego, to prove you are the successful CEO. Well, congratulations. You have a fat bank account and zero social skills. Jackson and I are getting married next year, and we need this Mediterranean trip to decompress. You are just a jealous spinster who cannot stand seeing other people happy in love. Jackson's sister is single, vibrant, and actually knows how to enjoy a cocktail without checking her work email. Do everyone a favor and just go back to your freezing warehouses." Harper tossed the phone back to Evelyn. I heard my mother murmur something in agreement. The terminal around me continued its frantic pace, but my internal world went entirely still. The lingering ache in my chest vanished, replaced by a crystalline, glacial clarity. I had spent my entire adult life building a logistics empire in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. I coordinated supply drops for research teams trapped on remote glaciers. I managed millions of dollars in heavy equipment, navigating blizzards and broken supply chains with unwavering precision. I commanded respect in boardrooms filled with hardened Arctic veterans. Yet I reduced myself to a desperate, seeking child the moment I stepped into my family's presence. I funded their superficial lifestyles, hoping my utility would eventually translate into genuine affection. Harper spent her days posting curated photos of expensive lattes and complaining about her cuticles. Yet she was the golden child. I kept a roof over their heads, yet I was the disposable burden. They did not view me as a daughter. They did not view me as a sister. I was an automated teller machine. I was a resource to be extracted, managed, and discarded the moment I became inconvenient to their aesthetic. "Are you still there?" Evelyn asked, sounding deeply bored. "We really must go. The priority boarding line is opening." "I am here," I said. My voice was smooth, stripped of all previous tension. I was no longer a daughter seeking validation. I was a chief executive officer evaluating a failed investment. "Well, try to find a hobby while we are gone," Evelyn instructed. "Do not sit in the dark and sulk. We will call you when we dock in Rome." "Have a good flight, Mom," I said. I hit the end call button. I did not hurl my phone across the terminal. I did not sink into a row of waiting chairs and weep into my hands. I turned around and grasped the handle of my rolling suitcase. The wheels glided smoothly over the polished terrazzo floors. I walked past the ticketing desks, past the long lines of frustrated travelers, and headed toward a secluded concourse cafe located near the domestic gates. The scent of roasted espresso beans and fresh pastries cut through the sterile airport air. I ordered a black coffee from the barista, paying with exact change. I found a small, isolated table tucked into the back corner of the cafe, shielded from the main walkway by a frosted glass partition. I set my coffee down, the dark liquid steaming in the paper cup. I unzipped the heavy ballistic nylon of my carry-on bag. I slid my encrypted corporate laptop out of its protective sleeve and placed it flat on the table. The brushed metal felt cool under my fingertips. I flipped the screen open. The biometric scanner read my fingerprint, unlocking the desktop instantly. The emotional ties holding me hostage for 3 decades were officially severed. My family wanted a luxury vacation free from my dark, stressful energy. They wanted to enjoy premium excursions and unlimited cocktails without my inconvenient presence casting a shadow over their photos. They believed they held all the power because they possessed the boarding passes. They fundamentally misunderstood the architecture of their own lives. They were currently sitting in a VIP lounge, drinking champagne funded by my corporate account. They were preparing to board a ship where their room keys were tethered exclusively to my credit line. They were sleeping in a multi-million-dollar estate owned by my blind trust. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee. The bitter, scalding liquid sharpened my focus. I opened my web browser and navigated directly to the Luxury Cruise Line's premium passenger portal. I rested my hands on the keyboard, the quiet clacking of the keys barely registering over the ambient noise of the cafe. The time for seeking their approval was over. I was preparing to initiate my first silent counterstrike, and I was going to cut their financial lifelines with surgical precision. The ambient noise of the airport cafe faded into a low, steady drone. I focused entirely on the bright glow of my laptop screen. My fingers moved with practiced efficiency across the keyboard, accessing the Oceania Luxury Cruises passenger portal. I typed in the 12-digit alphanumeric reservation code. The screen refreshed, populating the dashboard with the upcoming Mediterranean itinerary. 4 names appeared in crisp black font: William Evelyn Harper Jackson. Status: boarding. Billing contact: Bella Turner, corporate platinum visa. The financial uncoupling required precision. I navigated to the onboard folio section of the website. The cruise line mandated a primary card on file for incidentals, daily gratuities, and pre-booked excursions. I clicked the billing tab. A prompt appeared asking if I wished to remove the default payment method. I hit confirm. The system paused, requesting a replacement card to secure the staterooms. I left the required fields blank, forcing the accounts into a pending cash hold status. The moment the ship entered international waters, the purser's desk would automatically lock their room keys. Their charging privileges would be frozen until a valid card was physically presented to the staff. I shifted my attention to the itinerary planner. Harper and Jackson had a couple's deep tissue massage scheduled for day 2. Canceled. William booked a private guided tasting at a cliffside vineyard in Positano. Canceled. Evelyn reserved a VIP cabana on the pool deck for the entire 2 weeks. Canceled. The green confirmation checkmarks vanished one by one, replaced by stark red text indicating a 0 balance due. Next, I canceled the premium beverage packages. At $100 per person per day, they anticipated drinking top-tier champagne from Barcelona to Athens on my dime. Now, if they wanted a simple bottle of sparkling water, they would have to reach into their own pockets. The financial safety net they took for granted was gone. My phone lit up on the table next to my keyboard. A new text message from Evelyn. It read, "Make sure you settle the final port taxes before we sail. I do not want to deal with paperwork at the desk." The sheer entitlement radiating from that brief demand was staggering. Instead of ignoring the message, I decided to deploy a strategic diversion. I needed them comfortable. I needed them to turn off their cellular data, order their first round of drinks, and sail out of range without checking their bank accounts. I typed my reply. "Don't worry about the balance. I will take care of it. Have a safe trip." 10 seconds later, a single emoji appeared on my screen. A smiling face wearing sunglasses. Smug. Triumphant. She thought she had won. She believed the established dynamic remained fully intact. I was the obedient wallet, and she was the revered matriarch. I opened a new tab on my web browser. Running a specialized Arctic outfitting firm requires extensive knowledge of international shipping, maritime law, and customs logistics. I frequently coordinate complex supply chains through major European hubs. I bypassed the consumer travel website and logged directly into a commercial shipping portal I utilize for my overseas freight partners. I located the contact information for a trusted customs broker based in Piraeus, the primary port of Athens, where their ship was scheduled to disembark at the end of the voyage. Using my corporate credentials, I initiated a formal transit bond hold. By paying a non-refundable administrative fee of €500, I legally registered a financial dispute regarding the imported luxury luggage currently checked under my billing profile. The Greek Port Authority operates under strict maritime collateral regulations. When the ship docked in Athens, customs officials would impound their heavy suitcases until the flagged financial dispute was resolved in person with local authorities. They would step off that ship expecting a seamless, chauffeur-driven transfer to the airport. Instead, they would find their designer resort wear and expensive toiletries locked inside a concrete customs warehouse. They would be handed a bill in euros and told to settle their localized debts before their belongings were released. The trap was set, primed, and operational. I closed the browser tabs. I logged out of my corporate portal and shut the laptop. The satisfying click of the metal chassis meeting the keyboard echoed the finality of my decisions. I lifted my paper cup and took a slow, deliberate sip of black coffee. The bitter dark roast coated my tongue. I looked out the frosted glass partition of the cafe toward the expansive airport concourse. For the first time in my adult life, my shoulders felt light. The chronic dull ache of striving for impossible approval had vanished. The exhausting mental calculus of trying to predict their moods and buy their affection was over. I was no longer carrying the crushing weight of their fabricated high society facade. I was just a woman sitting in a warm cafe, watching the snow fall on the Alaskan tarmac. The quiet peace lasted exactly 4 minutes. A sharp, high-pitched chime emanated from my phone. It was not a standard text message tone. It was a prioritized security override alert. I picked up the device. A red banner notification dominated the locked screen. It was an automated warning from my residential property management application. The notification read, "Main entry smart lock override. Master passcode entered. System disarmed." My pulse quickened. The notification corresponded to the coastal estate I purchased for William and Evelyn just months ago. The property was supposed to be empty. My parents were sitting on an airplane taxiing toward the runway. No one else possessed the master security code. I had a secondary service code programmed for the landscaping and maintenance crews, but the alert explicitly specified the primary override function was utilized. I unlocked my phone and opened the security application. The dashboard loaded, displaying the current status of the $848,000 property. The internal alarm system was deactivated. The thermostat had been adjusted upward. I tapped the icon for the exterior surveillance cameras, pulling up the live, high-definition feed from the front porch. The crisp, wide-angle video buffered for a fraction of a second before displaying my driveway. The snow had been neatly melted away by the subterranean heating coils I installed under the pavers. But the pristine, empty driveway was not empty. A sprawling, diesel-powered commercial moving truck occupied the entire front entrance. The truck cab idled thick, white exhaust pluming into the freezing winter air. The rear cargo door was rolled up, exposing a cavernous interior filled with cheap, generic cardboard boxes and bulky furniture wrapped in thick moving blankets. 3 men wearing heavy canvas work jackets and thick gloves were actively hauling an oversized, distressed leather sofa up the front steps. They navigated the icy perimeter, maneuvering the awkward piece of furniture directly through the custom glass double doors of my house. The doors were propped wide open, letting the freezing Alaskan wind blow freely into the grand foyer. Someone stood on the front porch holding a clipboard and directing the workers. The camera angle captured the top of his head and his distinct, tailored wool overcoat. He turned his face toward the lens to inspect a scratch on the door frame. It was Jackson, Harper's unemployed fiancé. He was not at the airport. He was not flying to Europe. He was standing on the threshold of my premium real estate asset, waving a moving crew inside. The realization hit me with the force of a physical strike. The betrayal was not limited to a stolen cruise ticket. The rejection at the Delta counter was merely a distraction. While my attention was focused on the Mediterranean itinerary, they were executing a coordinated invasion right here in Anchorage. The momentary peace I found in the Terminal Cafe shattered. The conflict had not been contained to international waters. It breached the front doors of my own territory. I shoved my laptop into my carry-on bag, zipped it shut, and stood up from the table. The tactical retreat was over. It was time to secure the perimeter. I steered my heavy-duty SUV down the Glen Highway. The snow-capped peaks of the Chugach Mountains dominated the skyline, casting long winter shadows across the frozen city. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel, the knuckles turning pale against the dark material. Managing an Arctic logistics firm meant I spent my days calculating risks, anticipating weather patterns, and predicting structural failures. I built my career on foreseeing disasters before they struck. Yet the disaster unfolding inside my own property was an entirely different breed of sabotage. I turned onto the private road leading into the gated coastal community. The wrought iron security gates swung open, granting me access to the enclave of manicured pine trees and sprawling waterfront estates. I navigated the winding road until my house came into view. The live feed from the security app had not done the chaotic scene justice. A sprawling commercial moving truck idled on the heated brick pavers, exhaling thick plumes of diesel exhaust into the crisp air. The pristine, quiet aesthetic of the neighborhood was shattered by the shouting of movers hauling bulky particle board dressers and cheap synthetic leather recliners up my front steps. The custom glass doors were wedged open with a rubber doorstop. The freezing wind blew directly into the grand foyer, chilling the imported hardwood floors I had painstakingly selected to elevate the space. I parked my SUV on the street, killing the engine. I stepped out, my winter boots crunching against the thin layer of frost coating the curb. As I approached the porch, a voice echoed from the grand foyer. It was loud, boastful, and amplified by a smartphone speaker. Jackson was holding court. "Yeah, man, the square footage is insane," Jackson bragged. He stood in the center of the foyer wearing his tailored wool overcoat and holding a paper coffee cup. "We are gutting the master bath next week. I need the space for the new startup headquarters. I am thinking we host the beta launch party right here on the back patio overlooking the inlet. Invite the whole angel investor network." A tinny voice replied over the speaker. "That is wild, Jax. I thought your future in-laws lived there." "They did," Jackson responded, taking a slow sip from his cup. But William and Evelyn realized the upkeep was just too much for them. They downsized to the cruise lifestyle and handed the keys over to me and Harper, an early wedding gift to support the new venture. It is all about generational wealth transfer, bro. I stepped over the threshold. My boots struck the hardwood with a sharp, rhythmic click. I reached down and kicked the rubber doorstop free. I closed the heavy glass doors behind me. The latch engaged with a definitive thud, cutting off the howling wind and sealing us inside the echoing foyer. Jackson spun around. The boastful grin on his face faltered for a fraction of a second before twisting into a smug, patronizing smirk. He tapped his phone screen, ending the call with his friend. He did not look like a man caught trespassing. He looked like a king, annoyed by a peasant interrupting his daily routine. "Well, look who decided to show up," Jackson sneered. "Harper warned me you might throw a jealous tantrum and try to ruin moving day. I heard you caused quite the scene at the airport check-in counter. Are you here to measure the drapes, Bella? Or just to pout in the corner?" I stood near the entryway, keeping my posture straight and my hands resting casually in my coat pockets. "Why is there a moving crew hauling synthetic leather into my foyer, Jackson?" I asked. My tone carried zero inflection. I stripped away any trace of anger, offering him nothing but cold, clinical observation. Jackson rolled his eyes, sighing heavily, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a toddler. "We went over this. Your parents gifted us the estate. William handed me the paperwork yesterday before they packed for the airport. They decided Harper and I needed a proper foundation to build our future. It is not my fault they trust my business acumen more than your frozen supply runs." He reached into the inner pocket of his wool coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He took 2 steps forward and thrust it toward my chest. I did not raise my hands to take it. The paper fluttered slightly, falling to the floor between us. I looked down at the document. It was a standard fill-in-the-blank quitclaim deed, the type of generic PDF template anyone could download from a free legal website in 30 seconds. At the bottom, William and Evelyn had scribbled their signatures in blue ink. The document lacked a notary stamp. It lacked a raised county clerk seal. It lacked the necessary municipal tracking numbers. My parents genuinely believed they could transfer an $848,000 asset using a piece of printer paper just because they felt entitled to the wealth I provided. I looked back up at Jackson, locking my eyes onto his. William and Evelyn do not own this property, I stated. They never owned a single nail in those walls. Jackson frowned, his smug facade cracking under the weight of my certainty. They signed the deed. I have the proof, right there on the floor. They signed a residential lease agreement. I corrected him, my voice slicing through the warm air of the foyer. I purchased this estate under a blind, limited liability company to shield my assets. My name is the only name on the corporate operating agreement. I allowed them to reside here to stop their previous condominium from entering foreclosure. They are simply tenants. A tenant cannot legally deed a property to a third party. The color drained from Jackson's face, rapidly replaced by a mottled, furious red. His chest heaved. The grand tech visionary illusion he had spent months constructing was evaporating in real time. The realization that he was standing in my house, ordering movers to haul his cheap belongings into my asset, struck his fragile ego like a physical blow. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, his breath smelling of stale coffee and artificial mints. "You lying, bitter spinster," he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. "You cannot stand that Harper is getting married. You cannot stand that I am building a tech empire while you freeze in a warehouse. William gave me this house. It belongs to us. Tell the movers to put the furniture back in the truck," I instructed, ignoring his insult entirely. "You have 5 minutes to leave my property before I have you removed for trespassing." Jackson's eyes darted wildly around the foyer. 2 of the movers had paused on the grand staircase, balancing a heavy dresser between them, watching the exchange with deep discomfort. Recognizing he had zero legal leverage to force me out, Jackson resorted to the ultimate manipulation tactic. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket. His thumb jabbed the screen. He lifted the device to his ear, keeping his furious gaze pinned on me. The moment the emergency dispatcher answered the line, Jackson's entire demeanor morphed. His shoulders hunched forward. He forced a frantic, high-pitched tremble into his voice, executing a theatrical performance designed to weaponize law enforcement against me. "Help me, please," Jackson cried into the receiver, panting heavily, as if he could barely draw a breath. "I am at my home. A woman just broke through the front door. She is screaming and threatening me and my moving crew. She says she is going to physically throw us out into the snow. I am terrified. She seems highly unstable. Please send officers right now. I fear for my safety." He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his coat pocket. He squared his shoulders, the furious red flush subsiding into a cold, triumphant sneer. He thought he had outsmarted me. He believed the arriving patrol cars would validate his fraudulent paperwork, intimidate me, and force me out into the freezing wind. He wanted a war, and he had just summoned the armed referees to the front porch. The distant wail of sirens pierced the crisp winter air long before the patrol cars turned onto the private road. The sound bounced off the frozen peaks of the surrounding mountains, growing louder and more distinct with every passing second. Inside the grand foyer, Jackson stood tall. He smoothed the lapels of his tailored wool overcoat, a triumphant smirk resting easily on his face. He believed he had successfully orchestrated my removal. He thought the arrival of law enforcement would intimidate me into surrendering the property. He fundamentally misunderstood the nature of authority and the power of meticulous preparation. I did not pace the floor. I did not hurl insults or raise my voice to match his theatrical energy. I simply waited near the entryway, retrieving my digital tablet from my oversized leather tote bag. Managing Arctic expedition logistics requires constant interaction with maritime enforcement customs officials and strict governmental oversight. I learned early in my career that panic is a liability. Documentation is the only currency that matters when the uniform steps onto the scene. 2 Ford Explorer police cruisers turned sharply into the gated enclave. Their tires crunched over the thin layer of frost coating the street. They turned onto my heated brick driveway, coming to a halt directly behind the sprawling commercial moving truck. Brilliant red and blue emergency lights washed over the pristine snowbanks and reflected harshly against the custom glass front doors. Jackson did not waste a single heartbeat. He pushed past me, shoving the heavy glass door open and sprinting out onto the front porch. He instantly resurrected the frantic, terrified persona he had deployed during the emergency dispatch call. His shoulders hunched, his breathing became erratic, and shallow puffing small white clouds into the freezing temperature. "Officers, thank God you are here," Jackson shouted, jogging down the concrete steps toward the idling cruisers. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of their vehicles. The lead officer was a veteran with a thick gray mustache and a heavy tactical vest. He rested his hand casually near his duty belt, assessing the chaotic scene. Sweaty movers were frozen on the driveway, holding particle board dressers, unsure if they should continue working or drop the furniture. She broke in. Jackson continued, his voice trembling with manufactured distress. "My fiancé and I just acquired this estate. We are trying to move our belongings inside, and this unhinged woman forced her way through the front door. She is threatening my crew. She is refusing to leave. I fear for my safety and the safety of these workers. Please arrest her and remove her from my property." Jackson reached into his coat pocket with a shaking hand. He pulled out the crumpled piece of printer paper he had thrown at my chest moments earlier. He thrust it toward the veteran officer. "This is the deed," Jackson insisted. "The previous owners gifted us this home. We have the legal right to be here." The veteran officer took the wrinkled paper. He pulled a small tactical flashlight from his vest and illuminated the page. His brow furrowed in deep skepticism. He flipped the paper over, searching for a raised county clerk seal, a municipal tracking number, or a legitimate notary stamp. He found nothing but generic, typed text and 2 hasty signatures scribbled in blue ink. I stepped through the front doors, pulling my heavy winter coat tight against the biting Alaskan wind. My boots made a steady, measured sound against the concrete steps. I did not run. I did not look frantic. I projected the exact same professional bearing I utilized when negotiating million-dollar supply contracts in hostile environments. I approached the second officer, a younger man, standing near the front bumper of the cruiser. "Good afternoon, officer," I said, my voice calm and clear. "My name is Bella Turner. I am the sole legal owner of this estate. The man currently yelling on my driveway is attempting to illegally occupy a corporate asset using a forged internet printout." Jackson spun around, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Do not listen to her," he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "She is a jealous, bitter spinster. Her parents gave me this house. That document proves it." I did not look at Jackson. I unlocked my digital tablet and opened my encrypted legal dossier. I handed the glowing screen to the second officer. "This property is owned by a blind, limited liability company established strictly for tax and privacy purposes," I explained smoothly. "On the screen, you will find the state-certified articles of incorporation. They feature secure government watermarks and official timestamps. You will see my name listed as the sole managing member and exclusive owner of the corporate entity holding the title." The second officer examined the digital documents, nodding slowly, as the irrefutable proof illuminated the situation. Furthermore, I continued swiping the screen to open the next file. My parents, William and Evelyn, were permitted to reside here under a strict residential lease to prevent their previous home from entering foreclosure. You are currently looking at the 50-page rental agreement they signed just months ago. I highlighted Section 4, Paragraph 2, which explicitly forbids the tenants from subletting the property, transferring residency, or altering the deed under any circumstances. They are tenants. They possess zero legal authority to gift this real estate to anyone. The veteran officer stepped forward. He handed the crumpled printout back to Jackson. The officer did not look sympathetic. His expression had hardened into cold, professional irritation. "This piece of paper is entirely fraudulent," the veteran officer stated, his voice dropping an octave. A residential tenant cannot sign over a deed to a property they merely rent. This document carries zero legal weight. Jackson stared at the paper in his hand. His jaw dropped. The grand illusion he had built, the arrogant tech visionary persona he utilized to impress his friends, began to shatter right there on the frozen driveway. "But we are moving in," Jackson stammered, his voice losing all its previous theatrical panic. "William told me the house was mine." The veteran officer ignored his pleading. He turned his attention to the three movers standing awkwardly near the open cargo door of their truck. "You men need to pack your equipment and put that furniture back in your vehicle right now," the officer commanded. "If you carry one more item across the threshold of this house, you will be placed in handcuffs and charged with aiding and abetting a residential burglary." The movers did not need to hear the warning twice. Eager to escape any criminal liability, they dropped the heavy synthetic leather recliner onto the snow-dusted grass. They sprinted back into the foyer, grabbed the particle board dresser they had left near the staircase, and hauled it out to the truck at top speed. They slammed the heavy cargo door shut, the metallic crash echoing loudly across the quiet neighborhood. Jackson watched his hired crew abandon him. His breathing became erratic, but this time the panic was genuine. The police were not going to protect his fabricated reality. They were not going to arrest the wealthy sister-in-law. They were enforcing the law, and the law dictated that Jackson was a trespasser. The younger officer stepped closer to Jackson, resting his hand firmly on his duty belt. "You have exactly 10 minutes to get off this property," the officer warned. "If you are still standing on this driveway when those 10 minutes expire, you will be formally arrested for criminal trespassing and attempting to secure a residence with fraudulent paperwork. Do you understand me?" The color drained from Jackson's face. He looked at the flashing lights of the cruisers. He looked at the heavy winter sky. He looked at me, standing tall and unbothered on my own front porch. The humiliation was total. He was being kicked out of the neighborhood he had just bragged about conquering. Cornered, terrified, and desperate to salvage a shred of his shattered ego, Jackson's brain short-circuited. He needed to prove he was a legitimate player. He needed to prove the paper in his hand held actual value in the real world. He made a catastrophic, unforced error that would alter the trajectory of his entire life. "You cannot do this to me," Jackson shouted, taking a frantic step backward toward his parked vehicle. "That deed is real. It has to be real. The bank already accepted it." The driveway went dead silent. Even the idling engine of the moving truck seemed to fade into the background. The veteran officer tilted his head, his eyes narrowing with intense, sudden focus. "What bank?" the officer asked, his voice slow and dangerously quiet. Jackson waved his arms wildly, entirely oblivious to the trap he was actively walking into. The underwriters at the tech lender Jackson cried out. "I submitted this exact paperwork to them 3 days ago. I applied for a $400,000 line of credit to fund my new startup. They are processing the equity loan against this house right now. The funds are supposed to clear on Monday. You cannot kick me out. I have a pending federal loan on this address." I stood on the porch staring at my future brother-in-law in sheer disbelief. He had just handed law enforcement the ultimate weapon. Jackson had not simply forged a document to impress his friends. He had transmitted that forged document across state lines to a financial institution attempting to extract nearly $500,000 against a corporate asset he did not own. The trespassing dispute had just evolved into a severe federal crime, and the consequences were about to bury him alive. The crisp Alaskan wind howled across the frozen driveway, biting at the edges of my wool coat. The silence following Jackson's frantic outburst felt heavy enough to shatter concrete. The veteran police officer slowly lowered his hand from his duty belt, stepping forward with a deliberate, calculating stride. His seasoned eyes locked onto the panicked man standing before him. "You submitted this unnotarized printout to a financial institution," the officer asked, his voice dropping into a register reserved for severe criminal interrogations. "You are stating you used this paper to secure a $400,000 equity loan." Jackson waved his arms, his tailored overcoat flapping in the freezing breeze. He was drowning in his own delusion, desperate to grasp any floating debris. The arrogant tech visionary persona dissolved into naked, pathetic desperation. "Yes, Jackson," cried out, his voice cracking under the intense scrutiny. "The underwriters at Vertex Capital are reviewing the file right now. I had to use an online tech lender because traditional banks take too long. But they froze my startup accounts this morning pending title verification. They flagged the deed. They need the primary resident to confirm the transfer. That is why I need this house." He turned his wild eyes toward me, stepping closer. The smug smirk was replaced by raw, unfiltered terror. "Bella, you have to call them. You have to verify the deed. If the funds do not clear on Monday, my new company folds. My investors will sue me into oblivion. You owe Harper this. Just tell the bank you transferred the corporate entity." I stared at him, letting the icy wind numb my cheeks. He actually expected me to willingly participate in federal fraud to save a business that produced nothing of value. He wanted me to risk my own freedom to validate his stolen prestige. "You just confessed to wire fraud, Jackson," I said, keeping my tone flat and clinical. "You transmitted a forged state document across state lines to secure funds against an asset you do not own. You did not secure an early wedding gift. You committed a felony." The younger officer reached up and tapped a small black square mounted on the center of his tactical vest. A tiny red light blinked to life, indicating the body camera was actively recording audio and video. "Sir," the veteran officer said, his posture rigid. "The local municipal police department does not handle interstate banking violations. However, I am formally documenting this interaction. The evidence you just provided verbally, along with the fraudulent document you handed me, will be forwarded directly to the district attorney and the Federal Financial Crimes Division before the end of my shift." The blood drained from Jackson's face, leaving his skin a sickly, translucent gray. He looked at the blinking red light on the officer's chest. The reality of his situation finally penetrated the thick layer of unearned entitlement he wore like armor. He was not going to host a launch party on my patio. He was going to face a federal indictment. I looked down at my digital tablet, swiping away the residential lease agreement to open my property management dashboard. I held the screen up, ensuring the body camera captured the bright white text illuminating the display. "Officers, there is one more detail to add to your report," I stated clearly. "This screen displays the digital entry log for the front door smart lock. At exactly 1:14 this afternoon, an unauthorized bypass code was entered to pry the locking mechanism open. Jackson did not just trespass. He committed breaking and entering to force his way inside my home." Jackson stumbled backward, his expensive leather shoes slipping on a patch of ice. He looked from me to the officers, his jaw trembling. He wanted to flex his dominance to prove he was a master of the universe. Instead, he handed law enforcement a perfectly wrapped package containing his own ruin. Without uttering another word, Jackson spun around and sprinted toward his parked luxury sedan. He threw himself into the driver's seat, slamming the heavy door shut. The engine roared to life, the tires squealing and spinning against the frost as he threw the car into reverse. He sped out of the gated community, leaving deep black skid marks on the pristine driveway. He abandoned the bewildered moving crew who had already piled into their commercial truck and were hastily exiting the neighborhood to avoid any lingering legal trouble. The police officers lingered for another 10 minutes to record my formal statement. They advised me to contact a locksmith to reset the tampered entry panel, thanked me for my calm cooperation, and returned to their cruisers. The heavy vehicles backed out of the driveway, their flashing emergency lights reflecting off the snowbanks, until they turned the corner and disappeared. I stood alone on the front porch. The Alaskan winter afternoon was already fading into a deep, bruised twilight. I walked back inside and pushed the custom glass double doors shut, securing the deadbolt. The grand foyer was perfectly silent. The chaotic energy of sweaty movers and shouting trespassers vanished, leaving only the soft hum of the radiant heating system. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the warm air fill my lungs. The immediate threat was neutralized. Jackson was running from a federal shadow he could not outpace, and my parents were sailing toward a financial blackout in the Mediterranean. My logistics training dictated that a breached perimeter required a thorough internal audit. William and Evelyn resided in this estate for several months. Jackson possessed access to the interior. I needed to ensure my property remained pristine, untainted by their reckless occupation. I began my inspection on the ground floor, checking the imported Italian marble countertops in the kitchen and the custom cedar pillars in the living room. Everything appeared untouched. The high-end staging furniture I purchased to elevate the space remained in perfect condition. I climbed the sweeping hardwood staircase, my boots echoing in the quiet house. I walked down the long corridor and pushed open the heavy oak door to the master's suite. The room was expansive, bathed in the fading purple light of the setting sun, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling bay windows. I paced slowly across the room, keeping my eyes fixed on the imported hardwood planks. I searched for scuffs, deep scratches, or any signs that the movers dragged their cheap synthetic furniture across the floorboards. I stepped toward the entrance of the cavernous walk-in closet. The space was lined with custom shelving and soft recessed lighting. As my right foot crossed the threshold, the sole of my boot caught the edge of a floorboard. I stumbled forward, throwing my hand against the wall to catch my balance. I frowned, looking down at the ground. The plank near the doorway was raised, resting a fraction of an inch higher than the surrounding wood. I knelt on the floor, running my gloved fingers along the seam. The wood felt loose. It shifted under my applied pressure. William was a man consumed by intense paranoia regarding the Internal Revenue Service. He spent hours complaining about government overreach, terrified that his terrible financial decisions would eventually trigger an audit. When I purchased this estate, I kept his name off the corporate registry, ensuring the asset remained shielded from his creditors. He likely viewed my house as the ultimate blind drop. I wedged my fingers under the elevated edge of the hardwood plank and pulled upward. The wood popped free with surprising ease, revealing a dark, intentionally hollowed-out cavity between the heavy floor joists. My pulse quickened. I reached into the shadowed space. My fingertips brushed against cold, heavy metal. I gripped the object and hauled it out onto the pristine floor. It was a rugged, fireproof mechanical safe coated in a fine layer of dust. The thick steel box featured a complex rotary dial on the front panel. Attached to the lid was a small, tarnished brass plaque securely riveted to the metal. Engraved deeply into the brass were my father's initials. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, pulling the heavy lockbox into my lap. The cold metal dial stared back at me, silently guarding the secrets William felt compelled to hide beneath the floorboards of a house he did not own. My tactical sweep for property damage had just evolved into an excavation of my family's darkest history. I sat cross-legged on the imported hardwood floor of the master closet, the fading twilight casting long, distorted shadows across the room. The heavy steel lockbox rested in my lap. The metal was freezing to the touch, leaching the warmth directly from my bare hands. A fine layer of gray dust coated the lid, leaving dark smudges against my skin. I ran my thumb over the tarnished brass plaque riveted to the top corner. William Turner. My father operated his entire life under a thick blanket of financial paranoia. He constantly complained about government audits and tax inspectors, convinced the Internal Revenue Service was orchestrating a grand conspiracy to seize his assets. He utilized cash whenever possible, hoarded receipts in shoeboxes, and trusted no one with his banking details. When I handed him the keys to this $848,000 estate, I kept his name off the corporate registry to shield the property from his past creditors. He clearly viewed my house as the perfect blind drop, a secure location to bury the secrets he could never risk keeping in a traditional bank vault. I stared at the rotary dial mounted on the front panel. It was an old mechanical mechanism, requiring a precise 4-digit code. William was a creature of rigid, predictable habits. I turned the cold steel dial to the year he married Evelyn. The internal tumblers remained silent. The latch refused to engage. I spun the dial again, entering the numeric code for his childhood street address. Nothing happened. A bitter, quiet realization settled into my chest. I wiped a streak of dust from the dial and entered the 4 digits that dictated the unspoken hierarchy of our family. 0914. September 14th, Harper's birthday. A distinct, heavy click echoed through the silent closet. The steel latch disengaged. The sheer predictability of his favoritism was almost laughable. Even when securing his deepest, most guarded secrets, my father prioritized his golden child above all else. I placed my hands on the cold edges of the lid and pushed backward. The hinges groaned stiff from years of disuse. I expected to find stacks of undeclared cash, hidden offshore account ledgers, or perhaps the vintage jewelry my grandmother supposedly lost decades ago. Instead, the safe was packed to the brim with thick, pristine manila folders. The scent of stale air and aged paper drifted upward, smelling like the damp basement of our childhood home. I reached inside and pulled out the first folder. The tab was labeled in William's tight, erratic handwriting. I expected to see his name or the title of some defunct shell corporation. The black ink spelled out, Bella Turner. My brow furrowed in confusion. I pulled the heavy folder into the sliver of twilight filtering through the closet doorway. I flipped the heavy cardboard cover open. The papers inside were preserved in clear plastic sleeves meticulously organized by date. These were not old report cards or childhood medical records. They were comprehensive financial portfolios. I slid a thick packet from a major national commercial bank out of its plastic sleeve. The date stamped across the top header was exactly 12 years ago. My eyes scanned the opening paragraph, and my heart skipped a beat, halting in my chest. It was a master promissory note for a high-yield, unsecured personal line of credit. The total approved amount was $150,000. The primary borrower listed on the first page was Bella Turner. Printed directly beneath my name was my exact Social Security number, my childhood home address, and a signature that vaguely resembled my own handwriting. My hands began to shake. The tremor started in my wrists and traveled straight down to my fingertips, rattling the stiff parchment. I flipped through the subsequent pages, tracking the bank transfer receipts. The line of credit had been maxed out within 3 weeks of the origination date. The funds were not used for home repairs or medical emergencies. Every single dollar had been systematically wired to a corporate checking account registered to Harper Lifestyle Branding. Harper Lifestyle Branding was my sister's very first attempt at becoming a high society social media influencer. She was 20 years old at the time, convinced she was destined for global fame. She rented expensive studio space, purchased racks of designer clothing for photo shoots, and traveled to Paris and Milan to capture the perfect aesthetic. The venture collapsed within a year, producing zero revenue. My parents swore they never gave her a single dime for that endeavor, claiming Harper secured private angel investors. The undeniable truth was resting in my trembling hands. My parents were the angel investors. They used my stolen identity to fund her entire delusion. The sight of that forged signature blurred my vision. The sterile smell of the old paper triggered a visceral, agonizing memory pulling me backward through time. I am 21 years old. I am sitting in a cramped, windowless office inside a downtown Anchorage bank. The synthetic fabric of my cheap thrift store blazer scratches against my neck. A wall clock ticks loudly above the desk. I am exhausted working double shifts at a shipping dock to save every penny I earn. I am here to request a small business loan to purchase my very first Arctic transport container. I am so proud of the detailed business plan resting in my lap. The loan officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, looks at his computer monitor. He prints a document and slides it across the desk. He does not look impressed. He looks at me with profound, humiliating pity. "Your application is denied, Miss Turner," he says, tapping the paper. "Your credit profile is entirely destroyed. You have multiple defaulted loans and severely delinquent accounts currently in active collections. You are a massive financial liability." I remember the crushing weight of that moment, the feeling of the air leaving my lungs, the hot tears spilling over my eyelashes as I rode the public bus back to my parents' house. I walked through the front door, clutching the rejection letter, and told Evelyn my credit was mysteriously ruined. My mother stood in the kitchen pouring a glass of imported wine. She laughed. She called me financially illiterate. She claimed I must have applied for too many credit cards in college and ruined my own life through sheer stupidity. William sat in his recliner shaking his head, telling me I needed to be more responsible, like Harper, who was out building a global brand. They watched me sob at the kitchen table. They watched me struggle for the next decade, denied basic car loans, forced to pay exorbitant interest rates, fighting tooth and nail to repair a financial profile I never broke. They watched me suffer the agonizing real-world consequences of their federal crimes, and they never showed a single ounce of remorse. They deliberately ruined my 20s to protect and elevate the golden child. They stole my identity, committed severe financial fraud, and happily gaslit me into believing I was the failure. I sat on the floor of the empty master closet, surrounded by the irrefutable evidence of my family's ultimate betrayal. The lingering, fragile thread of familial loyalty holding my heart together turned to pure ash. It crumbled into nothingness, leaving behind a cold, dark void. The small voice in my mind that always whispered excuses for their behavior, the voice that hoped they truly loved me beneath their harsh exterior, went permanently silent. It was replaced by the ruthless, calculating instinct of a chief executive officer. My parents did not just take advantage of my current wealth. They actively stole my future before I even had a chance to build it. They felt entitled to my money now because they decided they owned me 12 years ago. Evicting them from this estate was no longer sufficient. Eviction was a slap on the wrist. They needed to lose everything. They needed to experience the exact same crushing financial devastation they inflicted upon me in that sterile bank office. I gathered the thick stacks of bag statements, the forged promissory notes, and the wire transfer receipts. I neatly aligned the edges of the paper and slid them back into their pristine plastic sleeves. I placed the folders into the heavy steel lockbox. I closed the lid and spun the mechanical dial, locking the criminal evidence away securely. I stood up, brushing the gray dust from my wool coat. The house around me felt different now. It was no longer a refuge I bought to save my family. It was a crime scene. I tucked the heavy lockbox securely under my arm and walked out of the master suite. My boots echoed down the long hallway, sharp and decisive. I stepped through the grand foyer, locked the custom glass doors, and walked out into the freezing Alaskan night. The cold wind bit at my face, but I welcomed the sting. It kept my mind razor sharp. I opened the door to my SUV and placed the safe on the passenger seat. I climbed behind the leather steering wheel, turned the ignition, and blasted the heater. The Bluetooth system instantly connected to my phone. I tapped the digital screen on the dashboard, scrolling through my contacts until I found the specific name I needed. I pressed dial. The phone rang twice. Graham answered. My corporate real estate attorney was a shark dressed in tailored cashmere. He handled all my high-level logistics contracts and possessed a reputation for ruthless efficiency. "Good evening, Bella," Graham said, his voice brisk and professional over the vehicle speakers. "How can I assist you?" "Graham," I said, staring through the windshield at the dark, empty street, "I need you to draft a commercial listing agreement right now. The coastal estate is officially on the market. We are selling the property." There was a brief pause on the line. "Bella, your parents reside in that home. Selling a premium asset with active tenants requires a standard 90-day notice period." "My parents are currently sailing across the Mediterranean," I replied, shifting the SUV into drive. "They broke their lease today by attempting an illegal sublet. They forfeit all tenant protections. Find a buyer willing to pay pure liquid cash. We are executing a 7-day close. When they step off that ship, they will not have a home to return to. Burn their safety net to the ground." Graham did not hesitate when I issued the directive to sell the estate. Working as my corporate counsel for the past 5 years had accustomed him to my swift, calculated maneuvers. He understood that when I made a decision, the deliberation phase was already over. I needed rapid execution. Finding a buyer willing to drop nearly $1 million in liquid capital during the dead of an Alaskan winter is a complex task. The traditional real estate market slows to a crawl when the snow begins to fall. Mortgages take weeks to underwrite, and average buyers demand lengthy inspection periods. I told Graham we did not have weeks. I needed the property liquidated before my parents' ship returned to port. "Leave it to me," Graham assured over the phone. "I have an extensive roster of private equity contacts looking to acquire premium waterfront assets. I will find a buyer who operates entirely in cash." I drove back to my downtown apartment, leaving the coastal property behind in the darkness. I slept better that night than I had in over a decade. The heavy, suffocating burden of carrying my family's fabricated high society facade was lifted from my shoulders. The stolen identity documents rested securely inside the steel safe on my dining table, a tangible reminder of why I could never look back. My phone rang at 7 o'clock the next morning. The caller ID displayed Graham's name. I answered while pouring a cup of hot coffee. "I found our buyer." Graham announced, his tone brisk and triumphant. His name is Sterling. He represents a global investment syndicate that acquires high-end wilderness lodges and remote estates to convert into exclusive corporate retreats. He caters to Silicon Valley executives who want to escape the city and pretend they are surviving the frontier in ultimate luxury. "Does he have the capital ready?" I asked, watching the morning sun reflect off the frost on my apartment window. "Sterling does not use banks," Graham replied. "His firm utilizes holding accounts flush with ready capital. He happens to be in Anchorage this week inspecting a ski resort acquisition. I told him about your property. He wants to tour the estate at 9 o'clock this morning. If he likes the architecture, he will bypass the standard appraisal process entirely." I finished my coffee in 2 swallows. I grabbed my keys, threw on my tailored winter coat, and headed straight back to the gated community. I arrived at the house 20 minutes early. The morning light cast a brilliant, blinding glow over the Cook Inlet. The water was partially frozen, thick sheets of white ice bumping against the dark shoreline. The estate looked flawless. The snow was perfectly shoveled. The custom cedar pillars framed the entryway with an imposing, rustic elegance. It was the exact type of turnkey asset a corporate investor dreamed of finding. At exactly 9 o'clock, a sleek, black town car glided through the wrought iron security gates. The vehicle lacked any snow or road salt, indicating it had been detailed that very morning. The town car pulled onto the heated brick pavers and stopped near the front steps. The rear passenger door opened, Sterling stepping out into the freezing air. He was a tall, lean man with sharp features and silver hair clipped close to his scalp. He wore a dark charcoal suit beneath a heavy wool overcoat paired with expensive leather gloves. He exuded an aura of total, unyielding efficiency. He did not look like a man who wasted time engaging in polite small talk. "Good morning," Bella Sterling said, offering a curt nod as he approached the porch. "Graham informed me you are motivated to sell today. I appreciate sellers who value momentum." "Good morning, Sterling," I replied, unlocking the front door and gesturing inside. "The property speaks for itself. Feel free to inspect the layout." Sterling stepped over the threshold and into the grand foyer. He did not ask about the neighborhood schools. He did not care about the local community center. He viewed the house purely as a mathematical equation. His sharp eyes scanned the vaulted ceilings, the imported hardwood floors, and the towering bay windows. He noted the seamless integration of modern luxury with the rugged Alaskan backdrop. He walked through the main living area, his leather shoes silent against the thick silk rugs I had purchased for staging. He ran a gloved hand over the pristine Italian marble of the kitchen island. He inspected the dual ovens and the commercial-grade refrigeration units. He checked the water pressure in the master bathroom and evaluated the structural integrity of the outdoor patio deck. The entire tour took exactly 15 minutes. Sterling returned to the kitchen, stopping at the center island. He pulled a slim silver pen from his inner coat pocket. He looked at me, his expression devoid of any discernible emotion. "The architecture is structurally sound," Sterling stated, resting his hands on the marble counter. "The aesthetic aligns perfectly with our portfolio requirements. We want to convert this space into a private executive retreat by next month. Graham mentioned you purchased this asset recently. I am prepared to offer you $1.1 million, liquid capital. I maintained my steady composure, though my pulse quickened. He was offering a staggering premium. The proposal represented a $252,000 profit generated in less than a year. However, Sterling continued, his voice dropping into a firm, uncompromising register. My firm pays a premium to avoid delays. I require a lightning-fast closing period. We will sign the final transfer paperwork in exactly 7 days. Furthermore, I noticed several closets filled with designer clothing and a garage containing personal golf equipment. My architects need a blank canvas. This house must be utterly stripped bare of all residential belongings by Friday afternoon. If there is a single coat hanger left in those closets, the deal is canceled. I looked into his steely eyes. He thought his strict conditions might intimidate a standard seller. He had no idea his demand for a rapid, ruthless eviction aligned flawlessly with my own personal agenda. My parents would step off their cruise ship, expecting to return to their stolen kingdom. Instead, they would find an empty shell owned by a faceless corporate syndicate. "We have a deal, Sterling," I said, reaching across the island to shake his gloved hand. "The property will be entirely stripped and ready for your architects by Friday." Sterling produced a leather-bound portfolio from his coat. He extracted a preliminary purchase agreement already filled out with his staggering offer. He slid the crisp white pages across the cold marble surface. I took his silver pen. I stared at the signature line for a brief moment. Signing this document meant severing the final physical tie to my family. It meant burning their unearned safety net to the ground. The pen glided smoothly across the paper. My signature was sharp, decisive, and final. Sterling retrieved the signed document, tucked it back into his portfolio, and offered a curt nod of approval. "My legal team will initiate the escrow process and wire the earnest funds within the hour," he promised. "Good doing business with you, Bella." He turned around, walked out the front doors, and climbed into the waiting town car. The vehicle glided away, leaving me standing alone in the sunlit kitchen. A profound surge of triumph washed over me. I had outmaneuvered their greed. I transformed the very estate they tried to steal into a weapon of my own financial liberation. The trap was set, the lock was engaged, and the countdown to their ultimate humiliation had officially begun. I picked up my bag, ready to return to my office, and organize the junk removal crew. I needed to ensure my parents' belongings were boxed and banished to a cheap storage unit before the Friday deadline. Just as I reached the foyer, my cell phone rang. The caller ID displayed the name of Diane, the senior escrow officer at the title company Graham frequently utilized for my corporate transactions. I answered the call, expecting a routine confirmation of Sterling's incoming wire transfer. "Hello, Diane," I answered, a rare smile touching the corners of my mouth. "I assume Sterling's team works fast," Bella Diane said. Her voice lacked its usual bright professionalism. She sounded breathless, her tone laced with sheer, undisguised panic. "We have a severe problem." The triumphant warmth in my chest vanished instantly, replaced by a cold knot of dread. "What is wrong?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Did the wire transfer bounce?" "The wire is fine," Diane replied, the sound of frantic typing echoing in the background. "But I just pulled the updated municipal records to prepare the clean title for the corporate transfer. The title search failed." My brow furrowed. "That is impossible," I stated firmly. "I purchased this property in cash. There is no mortgage. There are no outstanding loans against the LLC. The title is pristine." "It was pristine yesterday," Diane corrected, her voice trembling slightly. "But a legal roadblock was filed with the county clerk first thing this morning. A formal, legally binding hold has been attached directly to the property address. The entire sale is frozen. We cannot legally transfer ownership to Sterling until this is resolved." My mind raced, filtering through a dozen different catastrophic scenarios. "What kind of hold, Diane?" "It is a contractor dispute," she explained, reading the digital file aloud. A massive mechanics lien was just placed on the estate. The filing prohibits any sale or transfer of the deed until the underlying financial debt is fully settled. I stood frozen on the imported hardwood floor. The walls of the quiet house seemed to close in around me. Jackson had not just attempted bank fraud. He had triggered a cascading sequence of legal landmines, and one of them had just detonated directly beneath my $1 million exit strategy. A mechanic's lien, I repeated, my voice dropping to a flat, dangerous register. The grand foyer felt suddenly colder, the morning sunlight pouring through the custom glass doors offering zero warmth. I have not authorized any construction on this property since the day I purchased it. I am looking directly at the certified filing, Bella Diane said, her tone tense with professional urgency. The lien is registered to Apex Luxury Spas and Alpine Heating Solutions. The total encumbrance filed against the title is exactly $95,000. The paperwork includes a signed work order authorizing the installation of an interior glass sauna, imported Italian tile work, and an extensive expansion of the subterranean heated driveway coils. I closed my eyes, pressing 2 fingers against my temple. The sheer, staggering scope of Jackson's delusion was materializing in real time. While I was busy managing Arctic supply chains to keep my business profitable, my future brother-in-law had been actively treating my corporate asset like his own personal playground. "Who signed the work order, Diane?" I asked, bracing myself for the inevitable answer. Diane paused, the sound of a mouse clicking echoing through the phone. "The signature on the primary contract is Jackson Vance. He listed himself as the primary resident and authorized managing agent of the estate. The contractor filed the lien early this morning to protect his financial exposure." The timeline snapped into brutal focus. Jackson had likely strutted into the high-end showroom weeks ago, wearing one of his bespoke suits, projecting the aura of a wealthy tech entrepreneur. He commissioned a massive luxury build-out, assuming he could cover the exorbitant costs once his fraudulent $400,000 equity loan cleared the bank. But the loan did not clear. Jackson's desperate confession on my driveway confirmed his accounts were frozen by the federal underwriters. When Jackson failed to deliver the required deposit, the contractor panicked. He had likely already ordered the custom glass and the specialized heating coils. To secure his sunk material costs before a single hammer swung on my property, he executed the nuclear option. He locked down the title. "I will call Graham immediately," I told Diane, my mind already calculating the necessary tactical maneuvers. "Do not pause the escrow process. Keep preparing the closing documents. I will clear this title." I ended the call and dialed my attorney. Graham answered on the first ring, his usual crisp greeting replaced by a heavy sigh. He had already seen the emergency notification hit the municipal registry. "Tell me we can file an emergency motion to strike the lien based on fraud," I demanded, walking briskly toward the front doors. "We can," Graham replied, his voice laced with grim reality. "And a judge would likely rule in your favor, given Jackson possessed zero legal authority to bind the LLC. But the judicial process takes weeks, sometimes months, to secure a hearing date and formally expunge the record. We do not have weeks, Bella. We have 48 hours. I stopped with my hand on the brass door handle. "Sterling's deadline." "Exactly," Graham confirmed. "Sterling is a corporate shark. He acquires clean assets. He does not buy messy family disputes or tangled contractor litigation. If that title is not pristine by Thursday morning, Sterling will pull his $1.1 million offer. He will walk away, keep his capital, and likely blacklist your firm from any future commercial real estate deals. The lien must vanish." I hung up the phone. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone against the imported hardwood floor. Panic is an emotion reserved for people who lack resources. I was the chief executive officer of a logistics empire that operated in the most hostile environments on the planet. I negotiated with aggressive maritime unions and cutthroat suppliers daily. An angry local contractor holding my title hostage was just another vendor standing between me and my objective. I locked the estate doors, climbed into my SUV, and drove straight back into the heart of Anchorage. Apex Luxury Spas was located in a premium commercial district near the Midtown high-rises. I parked my vehicle in front of the sleek, modern showroom. Large digital displays showcased cascading waterfalls and custom cedar saunas glowing behind pristine glass walls. The aesthetic was designed to project exclusivity and immense wealth. I pushed through the heavy glass double doors. The showroom floor was quiet, smelling faintly of chlorine and polished cedar. A young receptionist sitting behind a white marble desk looked up, offering a practiced, brilliant smile. "Welcome to Apex," she greeted warmly. "Do you have an appointment with one of our design consultants today?" "No," I replied, my boots striking the polished concrete floor with sharp, measured precision. I bypassed her desk entirely, keeping my eyes fixed on the frosted glass office doors located at the rear of the showroom. "I need to speak with the owner." "Excuse me, ma'am," the receptionist called out, her smile faltering as she stood up. "You cannot just walk back there. Mr. Thorne is on a conference call." I ignored her. I approached the largest corner office, grasped the stainless steel handle, and pushed the door open. Marcus Thorne sat behind a massive mahogany desk, reviewing a stack of architectural blueprints. He was a broad-shouldered man with calloused hands and a thick gray beard, radiating the tough, no-nonsense energy of a seasoned contractor who had survived decades in the Alaskan construction industry. He looked up, his eyes narrowing in fierce irritation at the sudden intrusion. "I am on a call," Thorne growled, reaching for the blinking phone receiver on his desk. "Get out of my office." "My name is Bella Turner," I stated, stepping fully into the room and letting the heavy glass door swing shut behind me. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of Northern Point Logistics, and I am the sole legal owner of the coastal estate you just encumbered with a $95,000 lien." The irritation on Thorne's face vanished, instantly replaced by a dark, aggressive flush. He slammed the phone receiver down. He stood up, planting his large hands flat on the mahogany desk, leaning forward with an intimidating posture. "I do not care what corporate title you hold," Lady Thorne spat, his voice a deep, rough rumble. "Your brother-in-law marched into my showroom 3 weeks ago wearing a tailored suit and acting like he owned the entire inlet. He commissioned a massive custom build. He signed the contracts. He authorized the ordering of imported Italian sauna glass and specialized subterranean heating coils. Then he completely ghosted me. He vanished when the $20,000 deposit invoice came due." Thorne rounded his desk, his heavy work boots thudding against the floor. "I already paid my European suppliers. I have materials sitting in a freight yard collecting holding fees. I protected my business the only way I know how. I locked down your property. You are not selling that house until I am made whole." I stood my ground. I did not flinch or step back as he invaded my personal space. I let him vent his entirely justified rage. When he finally paused to draw a breath, I looked him dead in the eye and shifted the dynamic of the room. "Jackson Vance is a fraud," I said, keeping my tone deadly calm and stripped of any defensive emotion. "He possesses zero legal authority to bind my corporate entity to a construction contract. He forged his status as the managing agent. If you force me to litigate this lien, my attorneys will tie your company up in court for years. A judge will eventually strike the encumbrance, and you will spend thousands of dollars in legal fees fighting a ghost. Jackson's bank accounts are currently frozen by federal investigators for attempting mortgage fraud. He is destitute. You will never see a single dime from him." Thorne's jaw clenched tight. The aggressive posture slowly melted from his broad shoulders as the brutal reality of the situation set in. He was an experienced businessman. He recognized the stark difference between a wealthy client trying to dodge a bill and a hardened CEO laying out undeniable legal facts. "So what do you want from me?" Thorne asked, crossing his arms over his chest, his tone shifting from furious to highly suspicious. "You did not storm into my office just to tell me I am out 20 grand. I reached into my tailored coat and pulled out my corporate checkbook. I set it down on the edge of his mahogany desk. "I am not here to fight you, Marcus. I am here to offer you an immediate, highly profitable exit strategy." I opened the checkbook and retrieved a silver pen. I will write you a cashier's check for $20,000 right now, clearing your sunk material costs and your wasted time. You will not lose a single penny on this disastrous contract." Thorne stared at the checkbook, his eyes narrowing. "What is the catch?" "The catch is twofold." I explained, my voice razor sharp. "First, your office manager logs into the county portal and electronically releases the lien on my title before I leave this building. Second, you sign a document for me." I pulled my digital tablet from my tote bag and opened the encrypted file Graham had drafted earlier that morning. I placed the glowing screen on the desk next to the checkbook. "This is a sworn legal affidavit," I stated, tapping the screen. "It explicitly details how Jackson Vance fraudulently misrepresented himself, forged his status as the homeowner, and illegally signed your commercial work orders. You sign this affidavit and I hand you $20,000. Thorne read the digital document carefully, his lips moving silently as he processed the dense legal terminology. He looked at the blank check. He looked at me. A grim, satisfied smile spread across his weathered face. He recognized exactly what I was doing. I was not just buying a clean title. I was purchasing the ultimate weapon to destroy my sister's fiancé. Marcus Thorne picked up my silver pen. He weighed the sleek metal between his calloused fingers, his eyes flicking from the digital tablet to the corporate checkbook resting on his desk. He was a man who understood the harsh calculus of the construction industry. Walking away from a $95,000 lien was a bitter pill to swallow, but he knew exactly what I was offering. I was providing a guaranteed rescue from a doomed contract. A $20,000 check cleared his European suppliers, covered his freight holding fees, and kept his company firmly in the black. Attempting to squeeze a frozen bank account or fighting my corporate attorneys in a drawn-out civil suit guaranteed nothing but massive legal expenses and wasted time. "Print the document," Thorne commanded, his voice dropping into a low, decisive rumble. He tapped the screen of the tablet, indicating his agreement. "I will sign your affidavit." I forwarded the encrypted PDF directly to the wireless printer sitting on the credenza behind his desk. The machine hummed to life, swiftly churning out 3 crisp pages of dense legal text. Thorne retrieved the documents. He did not skim them. He read every single line, his heavy brow furrowed as he verified the language Graham had meticulously drafted. The affidavit left absolutely zero room for interpretation. It explicitly stated that Jackson Vance entered the Apex Luxury Spa's showroom, falsely presented himself as the legal homeowner, and willfully forged his authorization on commercial work orders. It further documented his failure to provide the mandatory deposit, establishing a clear timeline of his fraudulent intent. Thorne reached the final page. He flattened the paper against the mahogany desk, pressed the silver pen to the signature line, and signed his name with a heavy, aggressive stroke. He slid the documents back across the desk. I wrote out the cashier's check for $20,000, ripped it from the ledger, and placed it exactly where the affidavit had been. A perfectly executed, tactical exchange. "Now, the second part of our agreement," I said, carefully sliding the signed affidavit into my leather portfolio. Thorne picked up his desk phone and hit a speed dial button. "Tell Sarah to come in here," he instructed the receptionist. A moment later, a sharp-looking woman carrying a laptop stepped into the office. "Sarah, log into the municipal clerk portal," Thorne ordered, handing her the check. "Execute an immediate electronic release for the mechanic's lien on the coastal estate. The debt is settled. The encumbrance is officially withdrawn." The office manager nodded, resting her laptop on the edge of the desk. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Within 90 seconds, she turned the screen toward me. A bright green confirmation banner displayed the municipal seal, confirming the lien was legally struck from the county records. The title to my $848,000 property was completely pristine once more. "Pleasure doing business with you," Bella Thorne said, his tone carrying a grudging professional respect. He folded the check and slipped it into his shirt pocket. "I hope you nail that arrogant fraud to the wall." "I intend to," I replied, offering a single curt nod. I walked out of the showroom, the heavy glass doors closing behind me. The crisp Alaskan air hit my face, cold and incredibly refreshing. The tension that had gripped my chest since Diane's panicked phone call evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. I possessed the clean title required to secure Sterling's $1.1 million cash transfer. More importantly, I now held the ultimate, irrefutable weapon against my future brother-in-law. The signed affidavit was not merely a piece of paper. It was the final, devastating piece of evidence required to trigger a federal indictment. I crossed the polished concrete parking lot toward my SUV. I unlocked the doors, tossed my leather portfolio onto the passenger seat, and slid behind the steering wheel. I started the engine, the heater roaring to life to combat the freezing temperatures. As I reached for the gear shift, a rapid succession of sharp, frantic vibrations resonated through the center console. My cell phone screen lit up flashing with a series of high-priority international alerts. The notifications cascaded down the digital display, overlapping one another in a chaotic, desperate stream. I stared at the device, my hand hovering over the gear shift. The absolute financial blackout I initiated on the Oceania luxury cruise portal had finally detonated in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. The first notification was an automated alert from my corporate credit card monitoring app. It signaled a declined transaction at an international terminal. The amount attempted was significant, 18,400 euros. The subsequent notifications were a barrage of text messages sent via an international cellular carrier. They were all from Evelyn. The initial text read, "Bella, call the credit card company immediately. The ship is rejecting our room cards at the purser's desk. This is incredibly embarrassing. Fix this glitch right now." I did not reply. I sat in the driver's seat watching the timeline of her panic unfold across my screen. The luxury cruise was officially terminating in Athens, and the passengers were required to settle their final onboard folios before disembarking. Evelyn William Harper and Jackson had spent the past 14 days living like royalty. They charged premium champagne, expensive spa treatments, and private excursions to their room keys, blissfully assuming my corporate account would automatically absorb the exorbitant costs. 10 minutes later, the tone of Evelyn's messages shifted from annoyed entitlement to rising anxiety. "Bella, answer your phone. The ship security is getting involved. They are refusing to release our passports." Jackson tried to use his cards, but every single one of his accounts is completely frozen. He cannot access any of his startup funds. We are trapped in the terminal. Call me. My parents had relied on the Golden Child's fiancé to provide a backup financial net, completely unaware that Jackson's accounts were currently locked down by federal underwriters investigating his fraudulent home equity loan. The illusion of Jackson's massive wealth evaporated the moment he tried to swipe a piece of plastic. He was entirely broke, and he had dragged my parents down into his financial ruin. Another 10 minutes passed. The screen illuminated with a final, desperate message. The pristine, high society facade Evelyn spent her entire life cultivating was completely shattered by the brutal reality of International Port Authority regulations. "Bella, you have to wire money right now. The Greek customs officials impounded all of our luxury luggage. They told us a transit bond hold was placed on our bags due to a financial dispute. We have nothing but the clothes on our backs. We are standing in the port terminal with hundreds of people staring at us. You are humiliating your family. Send the money." The strategic diversion I executed days ago had worked flawlessly. The €500 transit bond I purchased through my customs broker had legally locked their expensive designer resort wear and premium toiletries inside a concrete warehouse in Piraeus. They stepped off the luxury liner, expecting a seamless chauffeur-driven transfer to the airport. Instead, they were standing in a crowded customs terminal, stripped of their passports, their luggage, and their dignity. They were surrounded by the very wealthy elite they sought to impress, publicly exposed as frauds who could not afford to pay their own bar tab. I picked up the phone. I did not feel a single drop of pity for the people panicking thousands of miles away. They had stolen my identity, ruined my credit, and attempted to seize my real estate asset to fund their delusions. They treated me like a disposable resource, assuming my loyalty was a permanent, unbreakable chain. I opened the text thread with Evelyn. I typed a single, chilling response, ensuring every word carried the precise weight of the secrets I had uncovered in the floorboard safe. I would love to help Mom, but my funds are tied up right now. Did you know the Internal Revenue Service actively flags suspicious home equity loans taken out on stolen Social Security numbers? You should probably look into that. Enjoy Greece. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. I dropped the phone into the cup holder and shifted the SUV into drive. I pulled out of the Apex showroom parking lot, merging onto the busy Anchorage thoroughfare. The psychological shockwave I just sent across the Atlantic Ocean would be devastating. The deafening silence from Europe over the next several hours proved they understood exactly what my message meant. William knew I had found the safe. He knew I possessed the 12-year-old promissory notes and the forged credit card applications. Jackson knew his attempt at massive bank fraud was exposed. The entire house of cards collapsed into the freezing ocean, leaving them completely exposed to the harsh, unforgiving elements of the real world. With the antagonists entirely neutralized abroad, it was time to initiate the final physical erasure of their entitlement back home. The estate was sold. The $1.1 million cash transfer from Sterling was scheduled to clear the following morning. I needed to ensure that when my family finally managed to scrape together the funds to fly back to Alaska, they would not find a comfortable refuge waiting for them. They would find nothing but cold, hard reality. The drive from Midtown Anchorage back to the coastal estate took 30 minutes. The winter sky remained a flat, unbroken gray, the impending snowfall casting a muted light over the frozen inlet. Inside the heated cabin of my SUV, the only sound was the rhythmic hum of the tires against the pavement and the relentless, frantic vibrations emitting from my phone in the cup holder. I ignored the screen. I knew the source. Evelyn's text messages had rapidly evolved into a barrage of international voicemails. When I finally pulled through the wrought iron security gates of the neighborhood, I parked my vehicle on the pristine, heated driveway. I shut off the engine and picked up the phone. I did not intend to return her calls, but I needed to assess the exact level of operational collapse occurring in Athens. As a logistics CEO, understanding the full scope of a disaster was critical to ensuring the clean execution of the final phase. I tapped the voicemail icon and pressed the phone to my ear. The audio from Greece was chaotic, a harsh collision of overlapping noises. The echoing announcements of the Piraeus port terminal blared in Greek and English over the crackling speakers. The sharp, authoritative voices of customs officials formed a tense background murmur. Layered over the ambient terminal noise was Evelyn's shrill, breathless voice. "Bella, answer the phone right now," she demanded, her tone vibrating with a mixture of sheer panic and deep, ingrained entitlement. "This is entirely unacceptable. The cruise director is standing right here in the lobby, holding our passports. They are treating us like common thieves. They claim our onboard folio has an outstanding balance of 18,000 euros. You told me you settled the final port taxes. You lied to me." She paused to draw a ragged breath, the sound of her expensive heels clicking against a hard floor coming through the receiver. "Jackson tried to use 3 different corporate cards, Evelyn," continued, her voice rising an octave. "Every single piece of plastic was declined. He is currently arguing with a Port Authority officer who barely speaks English. They impounded our luggage, Bella. They dragged our suitcases into a holding cage and slapped a transit bond sticker on them. William is having a mild panic attack near the currency exchange counter. You need to wire the funds to the purser's desk immediately. Do not embarrass your family like this. If you do not fix this glitch, your father will formally cut you out of the family legacy. We will disinherit you." I ended the playback. The threat of disinheritance was the ultimate bluff, a hollow, pathetic attempt to wield authority she no longer possessed. My parents had no legacy to pass down. William had gambled away his pension years ago, forcing me to buy the very roof over their heads to keep them off the street. They had no vast estate, no hidden trust funds, and no corporate assets. Their entire high society existence was a carefully constructed mirage, funded by my bank accounts and the stolen credit of their own daughter. I stepped out of the SUV and walked up the front steps. I unlocked the custom glass doors and entered the grand foyer. The house was quiet, smelling faintly of the cedar pillars and expensive pine floor cleaner. I navigated the audio menu and played the second voicemail. The chaos in the terminal had escalated. Harper was sobbing loudly in the background, a high-pitched, grating sound. My golden child sister, whose entire identity revolved around projecting a flawless, wealthy aesthetic to her social media followers, was currently experiencing a profound psychological breakdown in a public transportation hub. "Bella, please," Harper wailed into the phone, having clearly snatched the device from our mother. "You have to send the money. I am wearing yesterday's clothes. My makeup bag is locked inside my impounded suitcase. People are staring at us. Jackson is screaming at the security guards, and they threaten to detain him. You are ruining my pre-wedding vacation. You are just a cruel, bitter spinster. Pay the bill so we can go to our hotel." The sheer audacity of demanding rescue while actively hurling insults was staggering. I deleted the voicemail. I did not need to hear any more. The Mediterranean meltdown was proceeding flawlessly. The trap I set weeks ago had snapped shut, locking them inside a reality where their actions carried actual, tangible consequences. I walked into the master suite and retrieved my laptop from my tote bag. I sat on the edge of the large bed overlooking the frozen Cook Inlet. I opened my encrypted messaging application and typed the final, decisive communication they would ever receive from me. I needed a message that cut through the noise of the Greek terminal. I needed a statement that stripped away their arrogant demands and exposed the fragile, fraudulent core of their existence. I typed slowly, ensuring the precision of the strike. I would love to help, but my funds are tied up. Did you know the Internal Revenue Service actively flags suspicious home equity loans taken out on stolen Social Security numbers? You should probably look into that. Enjoy Greece. I hit send. The psychological shockwave was immediate. For the past 2 hours, my phone had vibrated relentlessly, a constant stream of frantic entitlement. The moment that single text message delivered the barrage, stopped entirely. The silence, stretching across the Atlantic Ocean, was deafening. It was the sound of total, catastrophic realization. Evelyn stopped shrieking at the customs officials. Harper stopped sobbing about her designer luggage. Jackson stopped arguing with the security guards. William knew I had found the hidden floorboard safe. The mention of the stolen Social Security number meant I possessed the 12-year-old promissory notes and the forged credit card applications. He realized his darkest, most protected secret was exposed. Jackson knew his attempt to secure a $400,000 line of credit using a fraudulent quitclaim deed was not merely a failed business transaction. It was a federal crime flagged by the authorities. They were standing in a foreign port stripped of their money, their luggage, and their passports, carrying the crushing knowledge that the foundation of their entire life was built on federal fraud. The house of cards had not just collapsed, it had incinerated. With the antagonists neutralized abroad, trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare of their own making, the path was clear to execute the final physical erasure of their entitlement back home in Anchorage. Sterling's $1.1 million cash transfer was scheduled to clear the escrow account the following morning. The preliminary contracts were signed, and the title was pristine, thanks to the strategic affidavit I secured from the contractor. The only remaining condition for the sale was a lightning-fast, ruthless eviction. Sterling demanded a blank canvas for his corporate architects. The estate had to be utterly devoid of all residential belongings by Friday afternoon. I did not intend to pack their items carefully into pristine moving boxes. I did not plan to arrange for a climate-controlled luxury storage facility to house their expensive designer wardrobes and premium golf equipment. The era of accommodating their high society delusions was officially over. I closed my laptop and pulled up the contact list on my phone. I managed complex Arctic supply lines, which meant I retained a roster of heavy-duty logistics crews capable of executing rapid, large-scale operations on zero notice. I dialed the number for a premium, rapid response, junk removal, and commercial packing crew based in downtown Anchorage. The dispatcher answered promptly. Northern Point Logistics, the dispatcher recognized my corporate profile immediately. "How can we assist you today, Miss Turner?" "I need a 12-man crew dispatched to the coastal gated community immediately," I instructed, my voice sharp and commanding. "This is a total asset liquidation. I need the entire residential contents of an 8,000 square foot estate packed and removed from the premises within the next 6 hours. The staging furniture stays. Every personal item, from the clothing in the closets to the spices in the pantry, must be boxed and loaded into the freight trucks tonight." The dispatcher paused, calculating the logistics of the massive sudden request. "We can mobilize 2 heavy transport vans and a full crew within 45 minutes. It will carry a significant premium for the expedited timeline." "Charge it to my corporate account," I replied. "I will be on site to direct the foreman." I ended the call and walked through the quiet, empty halls of the luxury estate. The afternoon sun dipped below the jagged mountain peaks, casting long, dark shadows across the pristine hardwood floors. This house had served as a monument to my parents' unearned privilege. It was a sprawling, expensive stage where they played the roles of a wealthy patriarch and a high society matriarch, entirely funded by the daughter they viewed as a disposable asset. The rapid response crew was en route. The physical dismantling of their fabricated lives was about to begin. When they finally managed to scrape together the funds to fly back to Alaska, they would not find a warm, luxurious refuge waiting to shelter them from the storm. They would find the cold, hard reality of an empty shell. The distant hum of heavy diesel engines signaled the arrival of the rapid response crew long before the massive transport vans turned into the gated community. The Alaskan night had fully settled over the coastal estate, plummeting the temperature and plunging the Cook Inlet into a deep, freezing blackness. The high beams of the commercial vehicles cut through the darkness, illuminating the pristine, snow-dusted driveway. The trucks backed up toward the front steps, their reverse alarms echoing sharply against the quiet, manicured houses of the wealthy neighbors. The heavy cargo doors rolled up, and a 12-man crew stepped out into the freezing air. They were dressed in matching gray canvas uniforms, moving with the practiced, efficient precision of a synchronized military unit. They did not dawdle. They did not ask questions about the nature of the sudden, massive residential eviction. They were premium contractors, paid double the standard rate to strip a mansion bare in the dead of night. I stood in the center of the grand foyer, the radiant heating warming the imported hardwood beneath my boots. The lead foreman, a burly man holding a digital clipboard, approached me for instructions. "The objective is total asset liquidation," I told him, my voice crisp and authoritative. "The premium staging furniture, the white sofas, the dining room table, and the abstract artwork remain exactly where they are. They convey with the commercial sale of the property. Everything else is boxed and loaded onto your trucks. Every piece of clothing in the closets, every golf club in the garage, every bottle of wine in the pantry. Leave nothing but bare walls and the staged aesthetic." The foreman nodded, tapping the screen of his clipboard. His crew surged past me, carrying stacks of flattened, heavy-duty cardboard boxes and industrial rolls of packing tape. The physical dismantling of my parents' fabricated high society existence commenced with brutal efficiency. The estate transformed into a chaotic hive of activity. The loud ripping sound of packing tape echoed off the vaulted ceilings, drowning out any lingering silence in the massive house. I walked into the master suite, leaning against the heavy oak doorframe. I watched a team of 4 workers systematically clear the expansive walk-in closet. Evelyn had spent the past 8 months treating the property like her own personal shopping mall, funding her extravagant wardrobe with the thousands of dollars she saved by living rent-free on my dime. The workers pulled her expensive cashmere sweaters, silk resort wear, and designer handbags off the custom velvet hangers. The luxury garments were unceremoniously folded, shoved into standard brown cardboard boxes, and sealed tight. In the garage, another team packed William's prized possessions. He boasted relentlessly at his local country club about his custom-tailored golf clubs and imported leather bags. He utilized those items as props to project the aura of a wealthy patriarch desperate to mask the reality of his squandered pension and his reliance on a daughter he actively despised. The workers wrapped the expensive clubs in cheap bubble wrap, tossing them into tall wardrobe boxes alongside his collection of premium cigars and half-empty bottles of scotch. The house was stripped bare in under 3 hours. The expansive rooms echoed with a hollow, sterile emptiness. The pristine staging furniture stood alone in the vast living areas, presenting the exact blank canvas Sterling demanded for his corporate takeover. The essence of William and Evelyn Turner was completely erased from the property. I signed off on the digital manifest. The foreman handed me a copy, signaling the loading phase was complete. The massive transport vans pulled away from the heated driveway, their tires crunching over the frost as they headed toward the destination I selected for the drop-off. I climbed into my SUV and followed the heavy trucks through the dark, icy streets of Anchorage. I did not direct the crew to a premium, climate-controlled storage facility in the upscale commercial district. I did not secure a unit with 24-hour security, carpeted hallways, and ambient heating to protect their delicate silk garments and imported leather goods. The era of accommodating their fragile, unearned luxury was officially terminated. I guided the convoy toward the industrial edge of the city. The glowing streetlights of the downtown high-rises faded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the flickering amber sodium lamps illuminating the loading docks and freight yards near the shipping port. The roads here were poorly maintained, riddled with deep frozen potholes and lined with rusted chain-link fences. The transport vans turned into a sprawling, dilapidated storage complex. The facility consisted of long rows of corrugated metal buildings sitting on cracked asphalt. The air smelled of diesel fuel and freezing salt water blowing in from the harbor. I parked my vehicle and stepped out into the biting wind. The foreman directed his trucks down a narrow, unlit corridor between 2 long buildings. We stopped in front of a standard 10-by-10 concrete unit. I paid $75 a month for the rental. It was entirely unheated, uninsulated, and lacked any internal lighting. It was a freezing, damp, concrete box designed to store old machinery and discarded commercial junk. The foreman unlocked the latch and shoved the heavy metal door upward. It rolled along the rusted tracks with a loud, grating screech that echoed across the desolate industrial park. "Unload the boxes," I instructed. The crew formed a human chain, hauling the heavy cardboard boxes out of the warm transport vans and stacking them inside the freezing concrete unit. The contrast was stark and deeply poetic. The designer handbags Evelyn paraded around the country club and the custom golf clubs William used to assert his dominance were now piled haphazardly onto a cold, stained concrete floor. Their entire fabricated life of luxury was compressed into a tiny, dark cage on the grimy edge of the city. The workers finished the drop-off in 30 minutes. The unit was packed from floor to ceiling, a solid wall of brown cardboard obscuring the back wall. The foreman handed me the final invoice. I authorized the corporate payment and added a generous tip for the crew's rapid execution. The transport vans fired up their engines and drove out of the facility, leaving me standing alone in the narrow, flickering corridor. The freezing Alaskan wind whipped through the industrial park, biting through my tailored wool coat. I reached up, grabbed the cold metal handle of the corrugated door, and pulled downward. The heavy steel door crashed against the cracked asphalt with a loud, echoing boom, sealing the dark concrete box shut. I pulled a cheap, solid brass padlock from my coat pocket. I threaded the heavy metal shackle through the rusted hasp on the door and squeezed it shut. The internal mechanism engaged with a sharp, definitive click. I slipped the small, jagged brass key into my pocket. The final physical tie to my toxic family was severed. Their belongings were banished. Their unearned refuge was reclaimed. I returned to my warm, quiet downtown apartment. The night passed in deep, uninterrupted sleep. The following morning, I sat at my kitchen island sipping hot coffee and monitoring my corporate banking dashboard. At exactly 9 o'clock, the screen refreshed. A bright green notification banner appeared at the top of the interface. The $1.1 million cash transfer from Sterling's corporate escrow account officially cleared. The massive influx of liquid capital settled securely into my primary business fund. The financial transaction was complete. The title transfer was finalized and legally recorded with the municipal clerk. The coastal estate, the property I purchased to save my parents from homelessness, no longer belonged to me. It belonged to a faceless, ruthless investment syndicate that planned to gut the master bathroom and convert the residence into a corporate retreat by the end of the month. The toxic umbilical cord connecting me to William, Evelyn, and Harper was permanently destroyed. The trap I meticulously constructed had snapped shut with flawless precision. My family was currently stranded in a Greek port terminal, their credit frozen by federal investigators, their luggage impounded by customs officials, and their minds reeling from the exposure of their 12-year-old felony identity theft. When the Greek authorities finally released them when they managed to borrow enough pity money from distant relatives to secure cheap economy tickets back to Alaska, they would board a flight expecting to return to the luxurious sanctuary they believed they owned. They expected to march through the custom glass doors of the coastal estate, unpack their bags, and plot their revenge against the ungrateful daughter who ruined their vacation. They had no idea the grand finale was already perfectly staged. The house was sold, the locks were changed, and their entire lives were currently freezing inside a $75 concrete box. I closed my laptop, the screen going dark. The preparations were complete. All I had to do was wait for the humiliated return of the golden child and her entourage. 14 days after the financial blackout detonated in the Mediterranean, the sliding glass doors of the Anchorage International Airport arrivals terminal hissed open. The freezing Alaskan wind swept into the building, greeting 3 broken, exhausted passengers. William, Evelyn, and Harper dragged their feet across the polished terrazzo floors. They did not resemble the wealthy, high society elite who strutted into the VIP lounge 2 weeks prior. The flawless aesthetic they spent their entire lives cultivating was entirely eradicated. They looked like refugees fleeing a natural disaster. They were sporting harsh, peeling sunburns, a painful consequence of being stranded in a Greek port terminal for days without access to their premium indoor cabanas or expensive sunscreens. They wore cheap, wrinkled tourist clothing bearing generic Athens logos, purchased with the limited pity cash they managed to beg from a distant aunt. Their designer resort wear remained locked inside the impounded suitcases overseas. Jackson was notably absent from the group. The moment his attempt at securing a $400,000 equity loan utilizing a forged document was flagged by federal investigators, his arrogant tech bro persona evaporated. He spent the entire transatlantic flight hyperventilating in a middle seat near the lavatories, clutching his dead smartphone, and ignoring his furious fiancée. Upon landing, Jackson scrambled away from the baggage claim, muttering about securing legal counsel before darting into a waiting taxi. Harper did not chase him. She was too consumed by her own manufactured misery to care about the imminent federal indictment hanging over her future husband. The trio stepped out onto the snowy curb, shivering violently in their thin cotton shirts. Evelyn practically shrieked at a passing rideshare driver, waving her arms frantically until a dented compact sedan pulled up. The vehicle smelled strongly of stale cigarette smoke and cheap vanilla air freshener, a stark downgrade from the sleek black town cars they usually demanded. They crammed themselves into the tiny back seat. William slammed the door shut, barking the address of the coastal estate at the bewildered driver. During the 40-minute drive through the city, the atmosphere inside the cramped vehicle was toxic. The air practically vibrated with their seething, unified rage. They were not returning home to reflect on their actions. They were marching back to their stolen kingdom to enact brutal punishment. Evelyn hissed venomous threats, declaring she would change the security codes, lock me out of my own property, and force me to beg for their forgiveness on the front porch. William ground his teeth, mentally rehearsing the booming, authoritative lecture he planned to deliver the moment he walked through the door. They truly believed the nightmare was over. They assumed the humiliation they endured in Europe was the peak of my retaliation. They thought they could simply return to the $848,000 estate, unpack their cheap tourist bags, and resume their rent-free existence while plotting my ultimate disinheritance. The dented sedan turned onto the private road leading into the gated community. The wrought iron security gates swung open, granting them access to the enclave of manicured pine trees and sprawling waterfront homes. The familiar sight of the neighborhood offered them a false, fleeting sense of security. The vehicle pulled onto the sweeping, heated brick driveway of the estate. William handed the driver the last crumpled bills of their borrowed cash. The trio climbed out of the car, their cheap shoes hitting the pristine pavers. The rideshare sped away, leaving them standing alone in the freezing wind. Evelyn did not wait for William. She marched directly up the front steps, her posture rigid with entitled fury. She reached the custom glass double doors and jabbed her manicured finger against the digital smart lock keypad. She punched in the master access code, fully expecting the heavy internal mechanism to click open and grant her entry to the luxurious sanctuary she believed she owned. The keypad flashed a harsh, solid red light. The locking mechanism remained completely silent. Evelyn scowled. She punched the numbers in again, hitting the digital buttons with sharp, forceful strikes. Red light. Silence. "William," she snapped, her voice cracking in the cold air. "The keypad is malfunctioning. Use your code. Open the door." William trudged up the concrete steps, shoving Evelyn aside. He entered his personalized access code, his jaw set in a hard, uncompromising line. The machine blinked red. He tried Harper's code. Red again. The smart lock had been completely wiped and reprogrammed. They were officially locked out. Evelyn's face twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged frustration. She began pounding her fists against the thick, reinforced glass, demanding that I open the door immediately. She screamed my name, the sound echoing loudly across the quiet, affluent street. When nobody answered her demands, she cupped her hands around her peeling face and pressed her nose directly against the custom glass to peer into the grand foyer. What she saw completely shattered her remaining grip on reality. The massive crystal chandelier still hung from the vaulted ceiling, but everything else was entirely wrong. The expensive premium staging furniture I had carefully selected was completely gone. The imported silk rugs, the plush white sofas, and the expensive abstract artwork had all vanished. The pristine, elegant interior had been replaced by a chaotic maze of lighting equipment and heavy black Pelican cases. Strangers were walking through the house. A crew of young professionals wearing black t-shirts and utility belts were actively setting up towering light stands and laying thick cables across the imported hardwood floors. A woman holding a digital tablet was directing a photographer toward the sweeping staircase. Sterling's corporate architectural team had already taken possession of the asset. They were executing a high-end commercial photo shoot to market the property as an exclusive executive retreat. Evelyn's mind violently rejected the visual information. She refused to comprehend that the house had been sold right out from under her feet. She began screaming at the top of her lungs, her voice fracturing with sheer hysterical desperation. She pounded both of her fists against the heavy glass doors with such extreme force that her knuckles began to bleed. The corporate crew inside the foyer suddenly stopped working. The photographer lowered his camera. The woman holding the tablet turned her head toward the front entrance, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of the sunburned, disheveled woman attacking the newly acquired property. Evelyn kept screaming, thrashing against the locked doors, as the total, devastating reality of her absolute ruin finally crushed her. She slammed her bleeding knuckles against the reinforced glass, leaving frantic red smears across the pristine surface. Her lungs burned as she shrieked, demanding the strangers inside vacate her property immediately. She wailed about her stolen retirement, her voice dissolving into pathetic, guttural sobs as her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the heated brick pavers, a crumpled heap of cheap cotton and shattered delusions. Harper stood frozen on the driveway, staring at her mother in sheer horror. The golden child, stripped of her designer clothing and her fake influencer aesthetic, looked small, frail, and entirely powerless. William rushed up the concrete steps and grabbed Evelyn by the shoulders, physically pulling her away from the door. He hissed at her to lower her voice, frantically glancing around the quiet, manicured street. He was utterly terrified of looking like a fool in front of the wealthy neighbors he had spent the last 8 months trying to impress. Evelyn violently shoved his hands away. Her highlighted hair was a tangled mess, sticking to her peeling face in sweaty clumps. She was entirely unhinged from reality. The suffocating cold beat down on the driveway as the minutes ticked by. The upscale gated community was usually a haven of absolute silence and enforced tranquility. Now front doors up and down the street began to slowly open. Wealthy residents stepped out onto their manicured lawns, drawn by the sound of Evelyn's relentless shrieking. They murmured to one another, pointing directly at the sunburned family, causing a massive public disturbance. William tried to offer a pathetic, reassuring wave to a man he had previously bragged to at the local country club. The neighbor simply turned his back and walked inside, closing his door with a definitive thud. The social death William feared more than anything else was happening right in front of his eyes. His fake prestige was evaporating into the freezing Alaskan air. Desperate to reclaim control, desperate to salvage his shattered ego and prove to the staring neighbors that he was still a powerful patriarch, William made the final, catastrophic decision that would seal their ultimate fate. He reached into his pocket, his hands shaking violently as he pulled out his cell phone. He dialed 911. "I need police at my house immediately," William bellowed into the receiver, his voice echoing loudly down the street. He puffed out his chest, attempting to project authority while wearing a wrinkled tourist shirt. "We have a massive home invasion in progress. There are dangerous squatters inside my luxury estate. They have locked us out and stolen all our belongings. Send units right now. They are tearing up my foyer." He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He looked down at Evelyn, offering a grim, triumphant nod. He genuinely believed the arriving police officers would clear the house, arrest the corporate photographers, and restore his stolen kingdom. He thought the law would validate his delusion. He had no idea the authorities he just summoned were the final piece required to execute the ultimate checkmate. The distant wail of sirens transformed into a deafening roar. 2 Anchorage Police Department cruisers tore around the corner of the private street. Their heavy tires breached the pristine curb, sending a spray of crushed ice and snow across the manicured lawn. The vehicles halted at sharp angles, blocking the driveway exit and bathing the frozen landscape in blinding flashes of red and blue light. 4 officers emerged simultaneously. They moved with practiced tactical caution, their hands resting firmly against their duty belts. They had received a high-priority dispatch detailing a home invasion in progress within an affluent zip code. Their eyes scanned the perimeter, evaluating the immediate threat level. William puffed out his chest, smoothing the wrinkled fabric of his cheap tourist shirt. He stepped toward the approaching uniforms, pointing a trembling finger at the custom glass doors. Inside, William directed, his voice laced with manufactured authority. They forced their way in. "They are destroying my property and stealing my belongings." The heavy front doors swung outward before the lead officer could even reach the concrete steps. Sterling stepped onto the porch. The corporate investor did not look like a dangerous intruder. He wore a tailored charcoal turtleneck and slacks, holding a steaming mug of coffee in his left hand and a crisp manila folder in his right. He surveyed the flashing lights and the frantic sunburned family with profound boredom. "Can I help you, officers?" Sterling asked, his tone level and unbothered. The lead officer paused, his hand still hovering near his sidearm. "We received a report of unauthorized individuals occupying this residence." Sterling took a slow sip of his coffee. He stepped forward and extended the manila folder. "I am the registered owner of this estate. My firm closed the cash transaction yesterday morning. The title is clear, and we hold legal possession. The people standing on the driveway are disgruntled relatives of the previous owner. They are currently trespassing." The officer reviewed the documents. The county seals were pristine. The notarized signatures were undeniable. The tension in the officer's shoulders evaporated, swiftly replaced by a hardened, dangerous irritation. Law enforcement professionals despise being weaponized for petty civil disputes. The officer handed the folder back to Sterling with a curt nod. He turned his attention to William. The freezing air grew thick with impending consequences. "Sir," the officer stated, his voice dropping into a stern reprimand, "you dialed emergency dispatch to report an active home invasion. You triggered a rapid, tactical response. Filing a false police report is a severe criminal offense. You have 10 seconds to explain why you are harassing the legal owner of this property before I place you in handcuffs." William stammered, the remaining color draining from his face. His commanding patriarch persona disintegrated into pathetic backpedaling. "There is a mistake. My daughter handles our finances. She bought this house for us. This man is running a scam. The deed is legally recorded," the officer countered, pointing toward the street. "You need to vacate the premises right now, or you will be transported to the precinct." The crunch of tires sliding over ice interrupted the standoff. A gray sedan swerved into the cul-de-sac parking haphazardly behind the police cruisers. Jackson threw the driver's side door open and stumbled out into the freezing wind. He had fled the airport earlier, desperate to consult a defense attorney regarding his frozen bank accounts. Finding no immediate answers and tracking Harper's location via a phone application, he arrived expecting to collect his fiancée and flee the state. Instead, Jackson found 2 patrol cars, 4 angry police officers, and his future in-laws facing imminent arrest. Jackson's paranoid, fractured mind misread the entire tableau. He saw the uniforms confronting William and Evelyn, and he assumed the federal banking investigation had already triggered local arrest warrants. He believed the authorities were rounding up everyone connected to the forged home equity line of credit. Self-preservation eclipsed any remaining shred of loyalty. Jackson raised his hands in a frantic gesture of surrender, his thin designer coat flapping in the breeze. He did not ask questions. He initiated a preemptive, cowardly strike. "I did not forge the signature," Jackson shouted, his voice cracking as he marched up the driveway. He pointed directly at Evelyn, who was still kneeling on the frozen pavers. "She gave me the quitclaim deed. She told me it was a legitimate transfer. Evelyn promised me the house was ours to use as collateral. I only submitted the loan application because she told me the title was clear." The driveway plunged into a stunned, breathless silence. Even the police officers exchanged bewildered glances, processing the spontaneous, unsolicited confession to financial fraud. Evelyn stared at her prospective son-in-law, her jaw unhinged. The golden couple, the pair she championed and prioritized over my own well-being for a decade, turned into venomous snakes the moment their survival was threatened. The superficial loyalty they displayed during their luxury vacations evaporated, revealing the hollow, transactional nature of their relationship. "You lion parasite," Evelyn shrieked, scrambling to her feet. She lunged toward Jackson, her manicured hands curled into claws. "You printed that fake document. You said your startup needed cash. You ruined us." Harper burst into tears caught in the crossfire as her fiancé and her mother viciously tore each other apart on the front lawn. William tried to intervene, grabbing Evelyn's arm, but she shoved him away, screaming insults at Jackson, while the police officers moved in to separate the brawling group. I watched the spectacle unfold from the plush leather interior of a vehicle parked just down the street. I tapped the partition glass. The driver nodded, easing the car forward. A sleek, immaculate black town car glided smoothly up to the curb, parking directly behind Jackson's abandoned sedan. The tinted windows shielded the interior, projecting an aura of quiet, untouchable power. The heavy doors unlatched. I stepped out onto the asphalt. I wore a tailored navy blue suit, the crisp wool contrasting sharply against the chaotic, disheveled scene unfolding on the driveway. My posture was straight, my expression an unreadable mask of calm observation. I did not project anger or triumph. I radiated the cold, unyielding authority of a chief executive officer who had successfully navigated a hostile takeover. Graham emerged from the opposite side of the vehicle, holding his signature leather portfolio. Behind him, 2 men in dark, unremarkable suits stepped out of the town car. They did not wear police uniforms, but their disciplined movements and watchful eyes betrayed their profession. They were seasoned financial crimes detectives holding federal badges in their breast pockets. The sharp click of my heels against the pavement cut through the shouting. The visual disparity was staggering. William Evelyn Harper and Jackson stood shivering in cheap, wrinkled clothing, their faces peeling, their dignity reduced to ashes. I stood before them, radiating immense, undeniable control. The screaming ceased. The family infighting halted as they turned to look at me. The realization of the vast chasm between our current stations in life washed over them. Evelyn's manic eyes widened. Her fractured mind performed a desperate, illogical leap. She saw her daughter arriving in a luxury vehicle with legal counsel, and she assumed her personal savior had finally come to fix the glitches. She believed the deep pockets had arrived to smooth over the police dispute, buy back their stolen kingdom, and restore her unearned prestige. She could not fathom a reality where I was the architect of her destruction. Evelyn broke away from the officers. She lunged forward, her cheap sandals slipping on the icy pavers. "Bella!" she cried out, her voice a ragged, desperate plea. "Tell these officers the truth. Tell them this man stole our house. Fix this, Bella. Pay them off so we can go inside. We are freezing." She reached her hand out, stopping mere inches away from my tailored sleeve, entirely blind to the severe, unyielding reality standing right behind me. She expected me to open my checkbook. She expected me to shield her from the consequences of her own boundless greed. She had no idea the federal trap was primed, loaded, and waiting for my final command to snap shut. Evelyn's outstretched hand hovered inches from my tailored sleeve, trembling violently in the freezing Alaskan air. Her peeling face was a desperate mask of expectation. She still believed she held the ultimate trump card simply by being my mother. She expected the decades of ingrained obedience to override the absolute financial devastation she had orchestrated against me. I did not step back. I did not raise my voice or offer a dramatic monologue. I maintained my perfectly composed posture, looking down at her with the cold, detached observation of a clinician inspecting a virulent strain of bacteria. I reached into the inner pocket of my navy suit jacket. I slowly withdrew 2 items: a jagged, cheap brass padlock key and a crisp, folded $100 bill. I held them between my thumb and forefinger for a brief second, ensuring Evelyn registered the profound insignificance of the objects. Then I released my grip. The brass key hit the icy brick pavers with a sharp metallic clink. The $100 bill fluttered down, landing directly against the toe of her cheap, borrowed sandal. "Unit 412, I stated. My voice was clear and precise, echoing down the quiet street where several wealthy neighbors had gathered on their porches to watch the spectacle. East Side Industrial Park. I paid the $75 rental fee through the end of the month. Every piece of designer clothing, every golf club, and every scrap of junk mail you left behind is locked inside that concrete box. The cash is for the rideshare to transport your family to the facility." Evelyn stared at the items on the ground. The gears in her mind ground to a violent screeching halt. The grand delusion she cultivated for decades evaporated into the freezing wind. I was not her savior. I was her executioner. Before Evelyn could even gasp, Graham stepped smoothly forward. He unclasped his leather portfolio, extracting a heavy, thickly bound manila dossier. He did not hand the file to the local patrol officers. He bypassed them entirely, extending the massive accumulation of evidence directly to the lead plainclothes detective standing at my shoulder. Detectives Graham announced, his tone projecting flawless legal authority. "My client is formally submitting comprehensive documentation detailing massive systemic financial fraud." The detective accepted the heavy folder. He opened the cover, his seasoned eyes scanning the meticulously organized contents. Inside, Graham continued, his voice carrying effortlessly across the driveway. "You will find 12-year-old promissory notes and credit card applications containing forged signatures. You will find bank transfer receipts tracing the stolen funds directly to corporate accounts controlled by the individuals standing before you. Furthermore, you will find a sworn, legally binding affidavit from a local commercial contractor explicitly detailing how Jackson Vance forged a state deed across state lines to authorize $85,000 in illegal construction, which he then utilized to apply for a fraudulent federal equity loan. The detective closed the dossier with a solid, definitive snap. He looked at me, offering a single respectful nod, acknowledging the sheer volume and undeniable quality of the evidence. It was a perfectly packaged federal indictment wrapped with a neat bow. The detective turned his attention to the shivering family on the driveway. His demeanor shifted from observant to highly tactical. He unclipped his radio, requesting secondary transport units to the location. William Turner, Evelyn Turner, and Jackson Vance, the detective called out, his voice sharp and uncompromising. You are all being detained for extensive questioning regarding organized identity theft, interstate wire fraud, and severe federal banking violations. Place your hands behind your backs. The command struck the group like a kinetic shockwave. William staggered backward, his knees buckling under the weight of his destroyed reality. The commanding patriarch persona he wielded like a club was completely erased. He looked utterly pathetic, a terrified, broken old man who had finally run out of lies to tell. He offered no resistance as a uniformed patrol officer secured his wrists in heavy steel cuffs. Jackson let out a high-pitched, desperate whine. He tried to scramble toward his idling sedan, but a second officer intercepted him instantly, twisting his arm behind his back and slamming him roughly against the hood of the police cruiser. The arrogant tech visionary who bragged about generational wealth was reduced to sobbing into the cold metal of a squad car, begging for a lawyer. Evelyn did not run. She remained frozen, staring at the brass key resting on the pavers. When the detective gently but firmly grasped her arm to turn her around, she finally snapped. She shrieked, a wild, unhinged sound that tore through the affluent neighborhood. She thrashed against the handcuffs, screaming at the wealthy neighbors standing on their pristine lawns. She demanded they intervene. She shrieked that she belonged in this community. She begged them to recognize her status. The neighbors watched in silent, profound disgust. The high society elite she sacrificed my financial future to impress were witnessing her public, humiliating arrest for stealing her own daughter's identity. Her social execution was absolute and permanent. Hopper stood entirely alone near the edge of the driveway. The golden child, the beloved influencer who demanded I fund her perfect pre-wedding vacation, was completely ignored by the authorities. She possessed no assets to seize and no corporate entities to investigate. She was entirely irrelevant. She clutched her arms around her chest, weeping hysterically as she watched her parents and her fiancé get shoved into the back seats of separate police vehicles. I did not gloat. I did not offer a dramatic parting speech or hurl insults at their retreating forms. I simply watched the toxic storm blow itself out. I turned my back on the wreckage of their boundless arrogance, the crunch of my boots against the frost, signaling the end of an era. I walked toward the idling town car. Graham opened the heavy rear door. I slid into the plush leather interior, the warm air wrapping around me like a protective shield. The door closed with a solid, satisfying click, sealing out the noise of the sirens and the wailing of the golden child. The town car glided smoothly away from the curb, leaving the shattered remnants of my biological family behind in the snow. Exactly 1 month later, the freezing Alaskan winter began to yield to the crisp, bright promise of early spring. I stood on a pristine, undeveloped stretch of coastal land overlooking the vast expanse of the Cook Inlet. The air smelled of salt and glacial runoff, clean and incredibly refreshing. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic crashing of the dark waves against the rocky shoreline. I unrolled a thick set of architectural blueprints across the hood of my SUV. The intricate white lines detailed a sprawling, modern logistics headquarters. The facility featured state-of-the-art, climate-controlled warehousing, executive offices with floor-to-ceiling windows, and specialized loading docks designed to streamline my Arctic outfitting empire. The entire development project, from the commercial zoning permits to the initial groundbreaking excavation, was fully funded by the $1.1 million liquid cash transfer I secured from selling my parents' stolen kingdom. Every single cent of the wealth they felt entitled to extract from me was now actively pouring the concrete foundation of my own expanding legacy. I traced my gloved finger along the designated property line on the blueprint. I had spent my entire adult life hauling heavy cargo, negotiating brutal contracts, and building a bulletproof corporate reputation, all while secretly carrying the suffocating weight of my family's fabricated disasters. I believed enduring their toxicity was a mandatory tax required to maintain the illusion of a family unit. The smoldering ruins of their federal indictments taught me the most profound lesson of my life. We are heavily conditioned to believe that blood ties forge an unbreakable, sacred contract. We are taught that loyalty is owed simply by virtue of shared genetics. However, respect should never be transactional, and the word family should never serve as a convenient shield for relentless financial exploitation. My parents measured human value by the depth of a bank account and the superficial optics of a country club membership. They mistook my calculated long-term patience for endless submission. They failed to realize that true power does not roar or throw public tantrums on manicured lawns. True power meticulously plans. It gathers indisputable evidence. It quietly builds an impenetrable fortress, while the toxic people around you look the other way. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire just to keep abusive relatives warm. Walking away from a table that constantly serves you disrespect is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate necessary act of self-preservation. The immense, exhausting energy you waste trying to earn impossible approval is the exact energy required to build your own empire. True wealth is not a stolen address, a forged corporate deed, or a luxury cruise ticket. It is the absolute, unshakable peace of knowing you can stand entirely on your own 2 feet, looking out at a horizon you built yourself. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and completely sever ties with toxic relatives to protect your own peace? Share your stories of survival and building your chosen family in the comments below. If my journey to absolute financial independence resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power, setting unbreakable boundaries, and holding the line for your own happiness. Remember, you always possess the absolute right to walk away and build your own kingdom.